everyone, Novels Wonderland here. Thank you all for the love and support you've shown me and the channel.
Naruto Path to Godhood, Chapter 496 to 513. 496. A questionable meal. 1127 words. Hanzo had been defeated. The news spread across the ninja world overnight, leaving everyone stunned. Who was Hanzo? Born in a small hidden nation, he once held off both the third Hokage and the third Kazekage on his own. Time and again, he walked the line between life and death, yet always survived, even daring to provoke the five great nations. No one doubted Hanzo's strength. Even those who found him unbearable had no choice but to admit he earned the title of demigod. In the past few decades, how many shinobi had been worthy of being called a god? The last was the first Hokage, Senju Hashirama. That title alone spoke volumes about Hanzo's power. Yet this very man, standing at the peak of the ninja world, had been defeated by a young shinobi and even captured. It was the most shocking news in years, more unbelievable than when the third Kazekage was taken by Orochimaru. After all, the Kazekage had faced multiple opponents. His defeat could be explained. But Hanzo had fallen in a direct one-on-one battle. Instantly, Konoha's lightning flash rose to unprecedented heights, surpassing even the five Kage. A few months earlier, when Hayashi stormed Kirigakure and ended the war on his own, some claimed he had only taken advantage of the released Six Tails. Now, no one dared question his strength. What made it even more terrifying was his age. Hayashi was only 18, far from his peak. If he could already defeat a demigod now, who could possibly stand against him in the future? The aging Kage? Or the still developing prodigies from other villages? But wasn't Konoha's lightning flash already the greatest genius alive? Who could surpass him? At that moment, many began to see a familiar shadow in him. Uchiha Madara. Strictly speaking, the past 40 years of the ninja world could be divided into two eras. The first was the age of Hashirama and Madara. Even after their deaths, the first great ninja war was merely an extension of their influence. Only after that war ended, when the second generation of Kage began to fade, did their era truly come to a close. Its peak had been the battle at the Valley of the End, where the two nearly destroyed half the world. No one understood their overwhelming presence better than the five Kage. Their power loomed like dark clouds, blocking out all hope. As long as Hashirama and Madara lived, no other nation could rise. That was an unbreakable rule for over a decade. The second era was the rise of the five great nations. Konoha remained dominant, still the strongest village. The students of the second Hokage held positions of power, while figures like the Sannin and Hitaki Sakumo continued to grow stronger. But compared to Hashirama's era, the difference was enormous. After all, no ordinary shinobi could compare to legends like them. Now, with Konoha's lightning flash defeating Hanzo, people began to sense the beginning of a new era. But if Hayashi was the new Madara, then who would become the new Hashirama? Without someone to oppose him, would the world fall under a single dominant force again? That was a future the other four great nations refused to accept. Yet they were powerless. This war had been started to suppress Konoha, but instead, Konoha only grew stronger with every battle. For a time, the entire ninja world was thrown into chaos, with urgent meetings held everywhere. Meanwhile, the man at the center of it all had nothing to do. Inside a camp tent, Hayashi sat quietly, staring at a recipe with a troubled expression. Sugar to taste. What does that even mean? He frowned. 1 spoon. And how big is this spoon supposed to be? He sighed. Fighting Hanzo had been easier than this. Deciding to play it safe, he planned to add less sugar, but his hand slipped, and half the bag poured in. Startled, he quickly added some salt to balance it. After nodding in satisfaction, he turned the page. When the oil is moderately hot, add scallion, ginger, and garlic, then simmer on low heat. This seems simple enough. At that moment, the tent flap opened, and Hitaki Sakumo walked in. He paused and sniffed the air. What is that smell? Hayashi turned and smiled. Clear-simmered salamander. Come try some, Tsukumo. He had personally defeated Hanzo and brought back the salamander. A few days earlier, the camp had made a large pot of soup from it. Although the creature was poisonous, its toxins were confined to specific organs. The meat itself was safe, tender, and surprisingly nutritious. Tsukumo had tried it before. It tasted good, but he still found the creature unsettling. He shook his head. I'll pass. You can have it. Hayashi looked disappointed. That's a shame. I heard salamander is good for the kidneys. Tsukumo instantly used body flicker technique and sat down. Well, even if I don't need that, I do feel a bit hungry. Hayashi chuckled and handed him a pair of chopsticks. It's not ready yet. Let's start with something else. On the table were dishes prepared earlier by Mikoto. Hayashi also brought out 2 flasks of sake, and the two began drinking. Pack some salamander for me later. I guess I actually like it, Tsukumo said. Hayashi nodded. I already set some aside, but you'd better be quick. It won't last long. Tsukumo blinked. Wasn't the salamander huge? I gave most of it to the camp for soup and shared the rest with some acquaintances. Hayashi lowered his voice slightly. The third Hokage alone took half. Tsukumo's expression turned strange. The Hokage needs that kind of thing. He said he has a friend with weak kidneys who needs it, Hayashi replied thoughtfully. Then what about the elders? Hamura and Danzo are both single. Do they need it too? I didn't dare ask. As steam rose from the pot, Hayashi skimmed the surface and poured a bowl for Tsukumo. Tsukumo frowned. You serve just like the camp cooks. It looks like a feast when you scoop it up, but once it's in the bowl, it's just soup. Hayashi laughed awkwardly and handed it over, not taking any for himself. Tsukumo didn't think much of it. He blew on the hot surface and took a sip. Hayashi leaned closer. How is it? It's my first time cooking. Mikoto usually handles this. After a long silence, Tsukumo clutched his throat and spoke hoarsely. It tastes great. His voice sounded completely different, trembling slightly. It reminded Hayashi of the time he tasted Kushina's cooking. Hayashi suddenly shouted. I just remembered, I'm only 18. I don't need anything for my kidneys. Chapter 497, Orders to eliminate the AIM forces. 1169 words. A perfectly good clear-simmered salamander stew ended up becoming something closer to burnt barbecue. According to Tsukumo, Hayashi's cooking was truly terrible. After forcing down a few more mouthfuls, Tsukumo grew a little sentimental. Just a month ago, the two of them had been running all over the land of fire without rest. Ever since Hanzo's defeat, everything suddenly felt calmer. Of course, that was only on the surface. As commanders, both of them still had plenty of responsibilities, but their confidence had clearly increased. No one had expected the war to progress this smoothly. After all, the title demigod carried immense weight. Even the legendary Sannin earned their names after facing Hanzo during the Second Shinobi World War, barely managing to survive against him. Yet now, years later, a younger generation had defeated that same man who once stood at the peak of the ninja world. Originally, Konoha's plan had been simple: overwhelm Hanzo with numbers. It was similar to how the Third Reikage once fought 10,000 enemies alone, and eventually fell after being surrounded and exhausted. That was the worst-case scenario, assuming that both Tsukumo and Hayashi would be unable to defeat Hanzo in a direct battle. Under such circumstances, Konoha would have suffered heavy casualties, and there was no guarantee they could even capture him. The second plan had been a rotation strategy. Tsukumo had been stationed at the border of the Land of Fire, ready to ambush Hanzo after Hayashi engaged him. He had waited there for a long time, only to receive news that Hanzo had already been captured. By the way, Tsukumo Aniki, what's our next operation? Hayashi asked as he picked up a peanut with his chopsticks. He had skipped the daytime strategy meeting, and instead went to check on Hanzo. Tsukumo thought for a moment before answering concisely. Now that Hanzo has been captured, there are still a large number of Amigekure shinobi inside the Land of Fire. So next, we will reorganize the battle lines and carry out a second sweep to eliminate all remaining AIM forces within our borders. Hayashi raised a brow. You are not planning to accept their surrender. With Hanzo in their custody, Konoha could easily pressure Amigekure into withdrawing its forces. Tsukumo shook his head. The village has issued a strict order. Every AIM shinobi who entered the Land of Fire must be eliminated. The third Hokage's intentions were clear. Konoha's next step would be to move into Amigekure and use it as a forward base for further operations. Amigekure needed to be fully secured. Whether Hanzo would surrender was still uncertain, and even if he did, there was no guarantee he would remain loyal. In the ninja world, promises were fragile. To avoid future risks, Amigekure's military strength had to be reduced significantly. The AIM shinobi currently trapped in the Land of Fire were already cornered. If Konoha moved to eliminate them, they would resist, and casualties would occur. However, that was still preferable to being betrayed later. Officially, the mission was framed as avenging the civilians whose homes had been destroyed. In reality, the outcome remained the same. They all had to be wiped out. By the way, how is Hanzo? Tsukumo asked. Is he willing to surrender? Hayashi shook his head. He is still refusing. Keeping Hanzo alive was part of a larger plan. Konoha intended to use Amigekure as a route to advance into the Land of Wind or the Land of Earth. For that, they needed someone to secure the supply line. If Hanzo agreed to cooperate, it would make things far easier. For now, Hayashi's task was to persuade him. But Hanzo remained unyielding. If it does not work, we might have to install a new leader, Tsukumo said after some thought. Amigekure's internal situation was complex, and Konoha already had operatives embedded within it. If necessary, they could support a proxy to take control. However, such a plan would take time, and time was something Konoha did not have. After considering it, Hayashi shook his head. Let's wait a little longer. I want to try again. Tsukumo nodded. Understood. At the same time, inside Iwagakure's conference room, the third Tsuchikage, Inoki, slammed the intelligence report onto the table, his anger erupting. Hanzo is completely useless. What a disgrace. The elders around him remained silent, not daring to speak. Only one man, a red-haired shinobi with his arms crossed, broke the tension. What is the point of getting angry? The priority now is figuring out how to deal with Konoha. Rashi had returned to the village not long ago. Although he and Inoki belonged to the same generation, their relationship had never been smooth. He rarely stayed in the village, preferring to wander. When the war began, he had returned to the battlefield, only to be recalled soon after when news arrived of the attack on Kirigakure. Even now, his dissatisfaction with Inoki was obvious. During meetings, he often challenged him openly. This time, however, Inoki did not argue. He suppressed his anger and remained silent. Rashi smirked slightly and pointed at the map. Konoha has captured Hanzo. Their next move will definitely be to enter Amigekure. The third Kazekage chose to fight within his own territory and still cannot deal with Orochimaru. I said long ago that Tsunagakure would not achieve much. So Konoha's next target will most likely be us. He tapped the map again. If Konoha's Lightning Flash and the White Fang enter the Land of Earth, they have two main options. 1. Attack Kizugakure from both sides. 2. Advance directly toward Iwagakure. Either way, it puts us at a disadvantage. So we need to intercept them in Amigekure. An elder frowned. But that would divide our forces. Rashi let out a short laugh. And Konoha is not dividing theirs. They are already fighting on multiple fronts. If you are afraid, you might as well surrender now. Anoki still said nothing. In truth, Roshi's analysis was not wrong. There was also another critical factor. The land of Earth was filled with mountains, and its transportation routes were limited. That made it easy for enemies to cut off supply lines. If Konoha invaded, the forces stationed outside the village could easily be isolated. The best solution was to contain the war within Amigakure, just like during the previous war. But doing so required splitting their forces and pulling shinobi away from the village. And if Konoha's lightning flash suddenly appeared at their doorstep again, the consequences would be disastrous. Anoki hesitated. At that moment, Roshi suddenly stood up and slammed his hand on the table. "Give me 2,000 shinobi." His eyes burned with confidence. "I will personally crush the forces led by Konoha's lightning flash and the White Fang. I'll drop one bonus chapter for every 10 reviews. Leave a review/comment. One bonus chapter will be released for every 100. Power Stones. Read 80-100 chapters ahead on P at Trian. Chapter 498. 498. Hanzo's imprisonment 1874. Words. A dark and damp underground chamber lay deep beneath the Konoha encampment. Tap, tap, tap. Footsteps echoed steadily through the narrow corridor. Hayashi moved forward at an unhurried pace, stopping only when he reached a heavy metal door. The door was thick and reinforced, its surface covered in intricate sealing formulas. 2 jonin stood guard in front of it. Of course, more than just 2 shinobi were stationed nearby, but the true defense of this place was the layered barrier ninjutsu woven tightly around the chamber. When they saw Hayashi approach, the 2 jonin straightened immediately. Hayashi gave a slight nod. "Is everything inside normal?" One of the jonin, a member of the Hyuga branch family, bowed respectfully. "Everything is normal. Thank you for your work." After a brief exchange, the 2 shinobi formed hand seals at the same time. Chakra rippled outward from their bodies as they pressed their palms against the metal door. The sealing formulas across its surface flickered and shifted, then slowly faded. One of them produced a key and unlocked the mechanism. The heavy door opened. The cell beyond had been completely dark, but light from the corridor spilled inside, revealing a thin figure seated cross-legged at the far end. It was Hanzo. Hayashi stepped inside. A guard followed briefly to hang a torch on the wall before leaving again. Hanzo had not moved at all. His eyes remained closed, his posture steady, like someone deep in meditation. His armor was gone, replaced by a simple blue-gray robe. His hair was neatly kept, and his signature breathing mask still covered his face, giving him a composed and dignified appearance. Konoha had not treated him poorly. Even as a prisoner, he was given the respect due to a former leader. Creak, thud. The door shut once more. Hayashi walked forward and sat down cross-legged in front of him, less than a meter away. Hanzo was covered in multiple sealing techniques that suppressed his chakra completely. His physical strength had also been restricted, leaving him no stronger than an ordinary man. "Lord Hanzo, I've come again." At the sound of Hayashi's voice, Hanzo slowly opened his eyes, offering no immediate reply. Despite his calm expression, his thoughts were far from steady. Half a month ago, he had stood at the peak as the leader of the Hidden Rain, commanding fear and respect. Now, after a single defeat, he had fallen into captivity. The gap was something few could truly understand. Few, except perhaps the third Kazekage. For a brief moment, the disdain he once held for the Kazekage turned into something closer to sympathy. If he ever escaped, they might have much to discuss. But that possibility was distant. The Hidden Sen still stood behind the Kazekage, capable of negotiating with Konoha. The Hidden Rain had no such leverage. Hanzo felt a quiet frustration. He was cut off completely from everything he once controlled. His authority, his village, his subordinates, all gone. The isolation pressed down on him like a weight. In the beginning, he believed time would dull the discomfort. Instead, it only worsened. Each time the cell door opened, a flicker of hope appeared, perhaps someone had come to rescue him. And each time it closed, the silence returned, heavier than before. He even found himself wishing Hayashi would stay longer. Because once he left, the darkness would return, along with the only sound in the room, the steady beat of his own heart. After listening to it for too long, it began to feel suffocating. Hanzo had always been a cautious man, someone who surrounded himself with constant protection. In this confined space, that hidden insecurity had nowhere to go. It only grew stronger. His expression shifted subtly, but Hayashi simply watched. He was no expert in reading minds. He could not deduce thoughts from small changes in expression. After a moment he spoke. "Shall we talk?" No response. "Still don't want to speak with me?" Hanzo remained silent, though his expression gradually steadied. They looked at each other. The air in the cell grew heavy, the silence almost tangible. Hayashi let out a small sigh. "If you don't want to talk, I'll tell you something you might care about. Since your capture, the Land of Rain hasn't been peaceful." That caught Hanzo's attention, even if he did not show it outwardly. "Several of your subordinates believe you're already dead. They've started fighting for control of the Hidden Rain." Hayashi's voice remained calm. "At the same time, other forces have begun to rise. They're all fighting over territory and resources." The stability of the Land of Rain had always depended entirely on Hanzo alone. Once news of his defeat spread, everything changed almost overnight. Rogue ninja, bandits, and hidden factions that had once been suppressed began to surface again. The entire country fell into chaos. No one moved without a reason. With the Hidden Rain leaderless, it became a prize too tempting to ignore. Some groups even formed temporary alliances, hoping to survive the coming struggle while claiming their share. If Hanzo's strongest subordinates had united, things might have held together. But instead they turned on each other, each vying for leadership. The Hidden Rain had become like a powerful clan that suddenly lost its head. The heirs below fought fiercely among themselves, blind to the dangers surrounding them. And beyond them, countless predators watched closely. Chapter title: Hanzo's Imprisonment and the Collapse of the Hidden Rain. A dark and damp underground chamber lay deep beneath the Konoha encampment. Tap, tap, tap. Footsteps echoed steadily through the narrow corridor. Hayashi moved forward at an unhurried pace, stopping only when he reached a heavy metal door. The door was thick and reinforced, its surface covered in intricate sealing formulas. Two jonin stood guard in front of it. Of course, more than just two shinobi were stationed nearby, but the true defense of this place was the layered barrier ninjutsu woven tightly around the chamber. When they saw Hayashi approach, the two jonin straightened immediately. Hayashi gave a slight nod. "Is everything inside normal?" One of the jonin, a member of the Hyuga branch family, bowed respectfully. "Everything is normal. Thank you for your work." After a brief exchange, the two shinobi formed hand seals at the same time. Chakra rippled outward from their bodies as they pressed their palms against the metal door. The sealing formulas across its surface flickered and shifted, then slowly faded. One of them produced a key and unlocked the mechanism. The heavy door opened. The cell beyond had been completely dark, but light from the corridor spilled inside, revealing a thin figure seated cross-legged at the far end. It was Hanzo. Hayashi stepped inside. A guard followed briefly to hang a torch on the wall before leaving again. Hanzo had not moved at all. His eyes remained closed, his posture steady, like someone deep in meditation. His armor was gone, replaced by a simple blue-gray robe. His hair was neatly kept, and his signature breathing mask still covered his face, giving him a composed and dignified appearance. Konoha had not treated him poorly. Even as a prisoner, he was given the respect due to a former leader. Creak, thud. The door shut once more. Hayashi walked forward and sat down cross-legged in front of him, less than a meter away. Hanzo was covered in multiple sealing techniques that suppressed his chakra completely. His physical strength had also been restricted, leaving him no stronger than an ordinary man. Lord Hanzo, I've come again. At the sound of Hayashi's voice, Hanzo slowly opened his eyes, offering no immediate reply. Despite his calm expression, his thoughts were far from steady. Half a month ago, he had stood at the peak as the leader of the Hidden Rain, commanding fear and respect. Now, after a single defeat, he had fallen into captivity. The gap was something few could truly understand. Few, except perhaps the third Kazekage. For a brief moment, the disdain he once held for the Kazekage turned into something closer to sympathy. If he ever escaped, they might have much to discuss. But that possibility was distant. The Hidden Sand still stood behind the Kazekage, capable of negotiating with Konoha. The Hidden Rain had no such leverage. Hanzo felt a quiet frustration. He was cut off completely from everything he once controlled. His authority, his village, his subordinates, all gone. The isolation pressed down on him like a weight. In the beginning, he believed time would dull the discomfort. Instead, it only worsened. Each time the cell door opened, a flicker of hope appeared, perhaps someone had come to rescue him. And each time it closed, the silence returned, heavier than before. He even found himself wishing Hayashi would stay longer. Because once he left, the darkness would return, along with the only sound in the room, the steady beat of his own heart. After listening to it for too long, it began to feel suffocating. Hanzo had always been a cautious man, someone who surrounded himself with constant protection. In this confined space, that hidden insecurity had nowhere to go. It only grew stronger. His expression shifted subtly, but Hayashi simply watched. He was no expert in reading minds. He could not deduce thoughts from small changes in expression. After a moment he spoke. "Shall we talk?" No response. "Still don't want to speak with me?" Hanzo remained silent, though his expression gradually steadied. They looked at each other. The air in the cell grew heavy, the silence almost tangible. Hayashi let out a small sigh. "If you don't want to talk, I'll tell you something you might care about. Since your capture, the Land of Rain hasn't been peaceful." That caught Hanzo's attention, even if he did not show it outwardly. "Several of your subordinates believe you're already dead. They've started fighting for control of the Hidden Rain." Hayashi's voice remained calm. "At the same time, other forces have begun to rise. They're all fighting over territory and resources." The stability of the Land of Rain had always depended entirely on Hanzo alone. Once news of his defeat spread, everything changed almost overnight. Rogue ninja, bandits, and hidden factions that had once been suppressed began to surface again. The entire country fell into chaos. No one moved without a reason. With the Hidden Rain leaderless, it became a prize too tempting to ignore. Some groups even formed temporary alliances, hoping to survive the coming struggle while claiming their share. If Hanzo's strongest subordinates had united, things might have held together. But instead they turned on each other, each vying for leadership. The Hidden Rain had become like a powerful clan that suddenly lost its head. The heirs below fought fiercely among themselves, blind to the dangers surrounding them. And beyond them, countless predators watched closely. A weakened land, rich in resources and lacking leadership, was not something any shinobi would ignore. Not when the opportunity was this clear. A weakened land, rich in resources and lacking leadership, was not something any shinobi would ignore. Not when the opportunity was this clear. Chapter 499. 499. Forced into an alliance. 1310 words. The current situation in the Land of Rain was not unfamiliar to Konoha. Years ago, when the second Hokage fell in battle, he left behind countless unresolved issues. The most pressing among them was the matter of succession. Although he had already named a successor, his final moments added uncertainty. Before his death, he held Sarutobi Hiruzen's hand and quietly entrusted everything to him. That final statement, which carried the weight of a dying leader's will, did not receive full acceptance within the village. Konoha was never a place ruled by a single man's words. Even if the second Hokage had made his decision, others still had their own ambitions. The Uchiha clan, powerful and influential, had every reason to compete. Within the Senju clan itself, there were voices hoping that another Senju would take the position. Compared to them, the Sarutobi clan lacked the same level of influence. During that time, several clans within Konoha were strong enough to suppress the Sarutobi clan entirely. In their eyes, Sarutobi Hiruzen had risen too quickly. He came from a relatively modest clan background, so many questioned what right he had to stand at the top of Konoha. As a result, the village descended into internal conflict. While the First Shinobi World War raged outside, the major factions within Konoha fought among themselves for power, neglecting the battlefield. Defeats followed one after another. Then, at a critical moment, Uzumaki Mito stepped forward. The moment she appeared, all opposition vanished. Her identity alone was enough to silence everyone. She was the wife of the first Hokage, the first Nine-Tails Jinchuriki, and a member of the Uzumaki clan. More importantly, her strength was undeniable. There were even rumors that Senju Hashirama himself treated her with caution, and that Uchiha Madara avoided confronting her altogether. At one point, someone proposed that she temporarily take the position of third Hokage. She had the power, the status, and the support. Even the Uchiha could only voice quiet objections. But Uzumaki Mito refused. Instead, she chose to trust the judgment of the second Hokage. Sarutobi Hiruzen did not disappoint that trust. Along with the other 5 disciples of the second Hokage, he proved himself through achievements on the battlefield. At a young age, the 6 of them established their reputations. In the end, Sarutobi Hiruzen rose to the position of Hokage without further opposition. Hayashi's voice remained calm as he spoke. The Land of Rain doesn't have that kind of luck. He looked directly at Hanzo. Without you, this country has already begun to fall apart. Whether the Land of Rain remained stable or not did not matter much to Konoha in the long term. But at this moment, it could not be allowed to descend into chaos. Hayashi continued. Which is more dangerous, a hive with a queen, or one without? He did not wait for an answer. Without one. With a leader, even disorder can be controlled. Without one, everything breaks apart. Small groups form everywhere, and they attack anything in sight. Hanzo was that leader. As long as he existed, Konoha could maintain indirect control over the Land of Rain. If he disappeared, the resulting chaos would disrupt everything Konoha planned next. After listening, Hanzo's expression darkened. He had not expected things to deteriorate so quickly. So after all that, what do you want from me? He asked. Konoha had not executed him. Hayashi continued to visit him. There was clearly a purpose behind it. It's simple, Hayashi replied. Form an alliance with Konoha. He paused briefly before continuing. Our forces will pass through the Land of Rain to reach other battlefields. The Hidden Rain must ensure the safety of our supply lines. Hanzo's eyes flickered. After a long silence, he shook his head. That's impossible. I've already formed alliances with other nations. Nothing is impossible, Hayashi said calmly. Alliances can be broken. He gave a faint smile. Look at the hidden sand. How many times have they cooperated with us, only to turn around and betray us again? Hanzo fell silent for a moment. What if I refuse? Hayashi's tone did not change. Konoha has no reason to keep someone without value. We can have a member of the Yamanaka clan search your mind for information. He looked directly at Hanzo. It may leave you with severe damage. You could lose your mind completely. He spoke as if describing something trivial. The demigod reduced to tearing paper all day. That might become your future. Hanzo stared at him. You wouldn't do that, he said slowly. If I'm gone, the land of rain will fall into chaos. No one will secure your supply lines. Hayashi nodded. That's true. He sighed lightly. Which makes this troublesome for me as well. But if you refuse to cooperate, we will simply support someone else to take your place. That process will take time, Hanzo said. It will, Hayashi admitted. But war never goes perfectly according to plan. Even if it delays us, no one can stop Konoha's advance. He continued. There's something else you should know. The Hidden Stone and Hidden Sand have already begun mobilizing their forces. Hayashi's gaze sharpened slightly. If the land of rain remains unstable, we will not move into the land of earth or the land of wind. Instead, the battlefield will be set here again. Just like the Second Shinobi World War. Hanzo's expression tightened. That was the worst possible outcome. If three great nations turned the land of rain into a battlefield again, countless lives would be lost. This was exactly what he had always tried to prevent. Seeing his reaction, Hayashi pressed further. There isn't much time. Only by working with Konoha can you prevent this country from becoming a battlefield again. Hanzo spoke in a low voice. And what stops me from betraying you later? Hayashi smiled faintly. That's why we'll need some assurance. We will place a sealing mark on you. Once the war ends, it will be removed. Impossible, Hanzo said immediately. Sealing techniques varied greatly. Some restrained movement. Others could determine life and death. The most infamous among them was the curse seal used by the Hyuga clan. What Hayashi was proposing clearly fell into the latter category. Hayashi met his gaze without hesitation. I already told you. Nothing is impossible. Your life is already in Konoha's hands. He continued, his tone steady. And even without the seal, do you think you would be safe? I captured you once. I can do it again. We've already fought. You understand the difference between us. His voice remained calm, but the meaning was clear. And that wasn't even all of my strength. If you break the agreement, even hiding in the hidden rain won't save you. He paused briefly. You don't believe your village's defenses surpass those of the hidden mist, do you? Silence filled the cell. For Hanzo, the choice was simple, yet cruel. Accept the seal and live under Konoha's control. Or refuse and lose everything now. He could accept death. But he could not accept seeing the land of rain become a battlefield once more. After a long time, he finally spoke. How can I trust that you'll keep your word? The third Hokage's reputation is enough, Hayashi replied. He has never broken his promises. Hanzo closed his eyes. The silence stretched on. Hayashi waited for a while. When no answer came, he stood and turned toward the door. Just as he reached it, Hanzo spoke. I'll agree. Hayashi stopped. But I want to meet the third Hokage. Hayashi raised an eyebrow, then smiled. Of course. That can be arranged. I'll drop one bonus chapter for every 10 reviews, leave a review/comment. One bonus chapter will be released for every 100 power stones. Read 80-100 chapters ahead on P at Trian. Chapter 500, 500, Danzo's Order. Rain country was drenched in endless rainfall, the sky weeping without pause. A shinobi dressed in a black raincoat moved swiftly through the forest, leaping from branch to branch before finally arriving at an abandoned town. His landing was silent, practiced. Moments later, another figure descended from above. Cloaked in gray, he stopped a short distance away. His face was completely hidden beneath the shadow of his hood. May, you're late, the gray-clad man said, his voice low and edged with dissatisfaction. Sorry, May replied calmly, unaffected by the tone. He reached up and removed his hood, revealing his identity as Ida, known among Akatsuki as one of Yahiko's most trusted subordinates. There have been too many assignments lately. I couldn't slip away. Assignments. Ko repeated, his voice growing colder. Let me remind you again, Mei. You are a spy. Your priority is Lord Danzo's mission, not Akatsuki's activities. Mei's expression remained composed, a faint, controlled smile on his face. Lord Danzo also taught us that the essence of infiltration is to forget your identity and fully blend into your environment. That is the most effective disguise. Ko let out a quiet scoff. You'd better believe that yourself. You already know the consequences of betraying Root. Mei's smile deepened slightly. Of course he knew. He had personally executed traitors before, some of them people he had trained with since childhood. Those raised within Root were molded into tools. From a young age, they were stripped of identity and emotion, trained only to carry out orders. They had no names, no past, no future. Only obedience remained. Absolute loyalty to Danzo was not just a rule, it was doctrine. Root existed as Danzo's personal force, separate from the village's will. That distinction was never forgotten. Because Mei was someone Danzo valued, Ko did not press further. After issuing his warning, he moved on. How is Akatsuki progressing? Nothing unusual, Mei replied. Since Hanzo was captured, they've entered a phase of steady expansion. With Hanzo gone, Rain Country had fallen into disorder. Many factions were taking advantage of the instability to grow, including Akatsuki. Even so, their progress was limited. Without sufficient funding or supplies, their development remained slow. Danzo had attempted to establish contact earlier, sending someone to offer support. Yahiko refused outright. Despite his ideals, Yahiko was not naive. An unknown party offering full backing was clearly suspicious. It suggested outside forces attempting to gain control. He rejected the offer without hesitation. Danzo had been furious, though his position in the land of hot water prevented direct action. Initially, Danzo's interest in Akatsuki stemmed from the presence of Jiraiya's students within the group. Suspicion came naturally to him. When he heard they were spreading ideals of peace and cooperation, he immediately questioned their intentions. Jiraiya might appear careless, even foolish at times, but appearances could be deceiving. Danzo had learned that lesson from Hiruzen Sarutobi. Once, Hiruzen had seemed simple and approachable, someone others naturally trusted. But beneath that exterior was a man capable of decisive and ruthless action. Danzo would not be fooled again. He sent operatives to infiltrate Akatsuki, to gather information and, if possible, uncover evidence of forbidden techniques being shared. At the same time, he collected leverage on other Konoha shinobi. Anyone with potential to become Hokage was, in Danzo's eyes, a rival. However, instead of finding weakness in Jiraiya's students, news of Hanzo's betrayal surfaced. Enraged, Danzo attempted to manipulate Akatsuki again, intending to use them against Hanzo before discarding them entirely. When that failed, he turned to a second plan. Mei was ordered to eliminate Yahiko and take control of Akatsuki from within. But the attempt never succeeded. Yahiko was rarely alone, always accompanied by Nagato and Konan. Nagato, in particular, remained constantly wary of Mei's presence. There was no opportunity. With Hanzo's capture soon after, Danzo chose to keep Mei in place as a sleeper asset. Since then, Mei had continued operating under the identity of Ida, gradually earning Yahiko's trust. This meeting with Ko was the first contact since those events. Each time Ko appeared, he brought critical intelligence. This time was no different. Hanzo has reached an agreement with Konoha, Ko said. He will return to Rain Country soon. Mei's eyes narrowed slightly. The news was unexpected. Most had assumed Hanzo was already dead. The village plans to deploy Hayashi and Tsukumo to lead forces into the land of Earth, Ko continued. They intend to avoid prolonged conflict with Sunagakure. This strategy was highly confidential, known only to a handful within Konoha. Danzo, despite his position elsewhere, remained informed. Ko's tone grew heavier. This may not work in Konoha's favor. Even with an agreement, Lord Danzo does not trust Hanzo. If their retreat is cut off, the entire force could be annihilated. He deliberately omitted certain details and continued. Your mission is to prevent Hayashi and Tsukumo from advancing into the land of Earth. Mei raised an eyebrow. Even he understood the tactical advantage of shifting the battlefield there. It would trap Iwagakure's forces in the land of grass, creating a decisive pincer attack. But there was another factor. With Hayashi's current momentum, if he entered the land of Earth, the war might end quickly. If that happened, the credit he would gain would be overwhelming. Land of wind, land of water, rain country, and then the land of Earth. If Hayashi dominated all fronts, there would be nothing left for Danzo to claim. The intention behind the order was clear. Danzo wanted Hayashi contained. He wanted the war dragged back into the rain country. Chapter 501, 501, Danzo's plan to trap Hayashi. 1184 words delaying them might not stop Konoha's lightning flash from gaining merit. But if no delay was made, then stopping him would be completely impossible. The choice was simple. And yet, could Danzo's method truly be called wrong? His reasoning was precise. He did not trust Hanzo, and he feared that the hidden rain village might sever Konoha's retreat, leading to total destruction. It sounded cautious, even reasonable, far from the image of a radical shinobi. Even if something went wrong and the third Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi, learned of it, there would be no obvious flaw to criticize. Danzo always prepared multiple contingencies before making a move. In that case, what does Lord Danzo require of me? Mei asked quietly. With his current ability, stopping Hayashi and Tsukumo directly was impossible. That meant Danzo had already arranged something else. Ko nodded slightly and lowered his voice. At present, Tsunagakure is unaware of Konoha's next move. Ebizo and Raza have already led a unit to the border between the land of wind and the land of rain. This situation had been intentionally created by Hayashi and Tsukumo. Previously, Tsunagakure had not stationed forces there, focusing instead on Orochimaru. By drawing some of their forces away, the pressure on Orochimaru and Tsunade was reduced, allowing Konoha to gain localized advantages. But Danzo intended to exploit this. A group of sand shinobi will soon attack civilians within the land of rain, Ko continued. Your task is to guide Akatsuki into discovering this attack, and push them into conflict with Tsunagakure. These sand shinobi were imposters. Framing operations like this were standard practice for Root. Their purpose was simple, to provoke war between two sides. Once conflict erupted, Tsunagakure would not back down. They had already stretched their resources thin to maintain supply lines into the land of rain. On top of that, Hanzo had surrendered and made an agreement with Konoha. If they were then attacked and blamed, especially by a group like Akatsuki, they would retaliate without hesitation. Once Tsunagakure forces entered the land of rain, everything would fall into place. To stabilize the situation, Hayashi and Tsukumo would be forced to delay their advance into the land of Earth. And if Konoha did not move forward, Iwagakure certainly would. Two great villages pressing into the land of rain would be enough to pin Hayashi and Tsukumo down completely. With their current numbers, they might even lose the war outright. Danzo's plan was simple, efficient, and nearly impossible to trace back to him in the land of hot water. Ko straightened slightly, his tone turning stern. Lord Danzo was already dissatisfied with your previous failure. Do not disappoint him again. The threat was unmistakable. With that, Ko vanished in an instant, using the body flicker technique. Mei remained where he stood. Rain poured relentlessly over him, soaking through his clothes, yet he did not move. He raised his hand, catching the falling water before drinking from his palm. Yahiko often said that this rain was the country's sorrow. But to Mei it felt like something else. It was as if the rain was washing away the filth of the shinobi world, cleansing what little it could. Konoha did not have this kind of rain. There the skies were often clear, yet darkness lingered in unseen places. Even if it did rain, what would change? Root existed beneath the surface, hidden from light. Any filth washed away above would only gather there. Root was the source of everything foul within Konoha. May let out a quiet breath. He was just a shinobi, one born and raised within Root. Even after spending so much time with Akatsuki, after beginning to think for himself in ways he never could before, he still could not disobey Danzo. Orders from Danzo were absolute. There was no room to question, no space to hesitate. If obstacles existed, they were to be overcome. If none existed, they were to be created. Still, after living as a spy for so long, he had grown attached to Akatsuki. And more than that, he respected Yahiko. If only things had been different. By the time May returned to the Akatsuki base, night had already fallen. After changing into dry clothes, he stepped into the main hall, once again becoming Ida. The hall was filled with members discussing ongoing missions, but the topic soon shifted. Seated in a chair, Amano Cusick sighed. Who would have thought Hanzo would lose to Konoha's lightning flash? As someone born in the land of rain, he understood Hanzo's strength better than most. From a young age, Hanzo had risen with overwhelming force, seizing control of the country, and never losing to figures like the third Kazekage or the third Hokage. For years, no one believed he could be defeated. If the Hidden Rain village hadn't fallen into this state, no one would believe it, a young shinobi named Kira muttered, his expression dark. Amano Cusick leaned forward. With Hanzo defeated and the Hidden Mist village stabilized by one man, doesn't that make Konoha's lightning flash the new god of shinobi? Kira's expression twisted with disdain. He could not stand others surpassing him, especially someone of the same generation. How old is he? Kira scoffed. Even if he won, he probably burned through his life force. Just like the first Hokage after the battle at the Valley of the End. He likely won't live long either. And you call that a god of shinobi? A few nodded in agreement. Encouraged, Kira continued. If you ask me, Hanzo is probably already dead. Konoha must have overwhelmed him with sheer numbers. That lightning flash only got the final blow through a sneak attack. This time, no one responded. The events in the Hidden Mist village were well known. Kirigakure had no reason to fabricate such a story to elevate Hayashi's reputation. A shinobi capable of such feats could not be dismissed so easily. Nagato and Konan stood nearby, their expressions tightening slightly. They clearly disliked Kira's words. When they were younger, Hayashi had once helped them, even leaving them with food. That memory had not faded. If they had insisted back then, things might have turned out differently. Nagato felt a faint sense of regret. Beside him, Yahiko simply smiled, his thoughts unreadable. Since returning from Hanzo's stronghold, Yahiko had changed. He was calmer, more deliberate. He had begun thinking deeply about Akatsuki's future, about power, and about the Land of Rain. Though he had not found clear answers, one belief remained firm. Helping the people of this country was never the wrong choice. At that moment, the door burst open. Defo rushed in, breathing heavily. What happened? Amano Cusick called out with a grin. Did something chase you here? Defo struggled to steady his breath. A shinobi reported seeing Hanzo in the Land of Rain. The entire hall fell silent. I'll drop one bonus chapter for every 10 reviews, leave a review/comment. One bonus chapter will be released for every 100 power stones. Read 100 plus chapters ahead on Patreon, Chapter 502, 502. Hanzo returned to the Land of Rain 1067 words in the autumn of the 38th year after the founding of Konoha. Heavy rain fell over the Land of Fire. At the same time, Hanzo finally emerged from the darkness of his prison cell, and made his way back toward the Land of Rain. From a geographical standpoint, the autumn rain in the Land of Fire and the ceaseless rain of the Land of Rain blurred together, becoming one. In essence, they were indistinguishable. But for Hanzo, who had escaped death and lived by fortune, the feeling ran far deeper. To his eyes, the rain in the land of rain was not as harsh as that of the land of fire. It carried a strange warmth, a peculiar scent he somehow recognized. It reminded him of something once spoken by the third Kazekage. After undergoing Konoha-style reforms and returning to the land of wind, the third Kazekage had touched the desert floor, trembling with age, and said with raw emotion that the desert was gold. Though later dismissed as insane and confined to Tsunagekyu's hospital, only he truly knew the depth of feeling in those words. Hanzo walked back toward the hidden rain village unhurriedly beneath the cleansing rain. Soon, word of his safe return from Konoha spread throughout the shinobi world like wildfire. What did it mean? Had Hanzo betrayed everyone again and aligned with Konoha? The news sent shock through the other great nations. The third Raikage was said to have smashed his own desk in fury. But it was too late. There was no time to deal with Hanzo now. While the nations raged, Hanzo silently approached the hidden rain village under the moonlit sky, as if untouched by the chaos. Overnight the village seemed quiet, like the turmoil had never happened, though the smell of blood lingered. In the following days, bearing the damage of his giant scythe, Hanzo traveled throughout the land of rain, and within 2 days every one of the 4 subordinates who had betrayed him met their end. What had nearly been a fractured land was steeled once more, and factions that once stirred turmoil fell silent. 7 days later, Konoha's lightning flash and the White Fang arrived, each leading 3,000 ninja through the rain toward the land of rain. At the same time, Tsunagakure shinobi under Ebizo and Raza gathered at the border of the land of wind, and Iwagakure forces led by the Four-Tails Jinchuriki Rashi and Fuga assembled at the border of the land of earth. In an instant the situation shifted, shaking the shinobi world to its core. Hayashi was no stranger to the land of rain. His first battlefield assignment had been there. First impressions always cut deepest, painful, yet unforgettable. Though he had wandered for 7 or 8 years before returning to this place, it was no coincidence. In the eyes of many like Madara, the world was so small that even vast lands barely contained one's ambition. Why, just a month ago, had Hanzo been an enemy? And now he stood as Konoha's strongest ally. Because Konoha's strength was massive, and where strength resides, alliances follow. Arriving again in the land of rain, Hayashi felt little emotion beyond the rain itself. Poverty defined this land more than anything, though it had been the first nation to end its wartime state, its circumstances had not changed. Its position was barren, and little could alter that fact. The Konoha encampment sat close to the hidden rain village, visible to any observant eye. The meaning of their alliance was plain. Inside the Konoha war room, Hayashi and Tsukumo both focused on the world map, eyes fixed on the tiny rain-soaked country wedged between the land of wind, the land of fire, and the land of earth. According to reports from the land of grass encampment, Shikumo said, gesturing at the map, Iwagakure forces show no unusual movements. Commander Kitsuchi remains on the front line, so all current Iwagakure troops have been drawn from within the village. Previously, each major village had pulled some of their ninja back to guard against Hayashi seizing their bases. But Iwagakure had chosen to reinforce the front, suggesting confidence in their homeland's defense. With the third Tsuchikage Inoki leading, they believed they would not be taken by surprise. But what surprised Hayashi most was this: there are 2 commanders from Iwagakure this time, Shikumo continued. The Tsuchikage's right hand, Fuga, and the Four-Tails Jinchuriki, Rashi. Hayashi's brow tightened. Rashi was not unknown to him. The first Jinchuriki Hayashi had ever faced was Rashi. At 10 years old, with Nawaki and Mikoto by his side, they had been soundly beaten. If not for Tsukumo's timely arrival, none of them would have survived. Even then, Tsukumo barely managed a draw by using his secret technique. Rashi had dominated them all. Perhaps that had been the peak of Rashi's strength, a shinobi who once subdued Konoha's lightning flash and White Fan before they had even reached maturity. If they met now, would Rashi still be so overbearing? Hayashi could not be sure. But he remained alert. Back then Rashi had controlled the Four-Tails. If he had since perfected that bond, then Hayashi's genjutsu could be rendered useless. The idea that all Jinchuriki were immune to genjutsu was both true and false. Naruto once fell under a genjutsu because his chakra was disrupted. A Jinchuriki's resistance only works if the tailed beast actively interferes to break the genjutsu. If the relationship was weak, then immunity could not be guaranteed. And with Inoki's wisdom, it was impossible he had failed to guess Hayashi had awakened his Mangekyo Sharingan. Yet still he sent Rashi, a testament to how much he trusted him. Everyone knows Rashi, but many may not know Fuga, Shikumo went on. Fuga was active in ANBU before being transferred out by the third Tsuchikage. He has immense strength, a rock-like physique, mastery of taijutsu and earth release, and is also an expert in sealing techniques. Currently, he leads the Iwagakure sealing squad. All eyes turned to Hayashi. A master of sealing techniques was no small concern. Iwagakure's decision to send such a ninja suggested that should anything happen to Rashi, Fuga was there to ensure the safety of the Four Tails. Inoki remained vigilant. I've been dealing with exams lately, so updates have been a bit slower than usual. Chapter 503, 503, Sand Village Strategy 1375 words compared to the grand mobilization of Iwagakure, the atmosphere within the hidden sand village was surprisingly subdued. Their commanders were Ebizo and Raza, old allies familiar with one another. Most of the ninja under their command had fought in the Land of Water theater. Many had never battled the hidden sand village before, but they knew the two commanders well through repeated engagements. In fact, it was Chiyo who first spread the reputation of Uchiha Hayashi. During the Second Great Ninja War, Tsukumo Hatake had fought Ebizo and Raza alone and killed Chiyo's son Iwakura and his wife. Later, those two, alongside Orochimaru and Jiraiya, had confronted the third Kazekage and captured him, taking him back to their village. The psychological impact of these past battles was immense, so it was no surprise that many looked down on the hidden sand village. The only concern is whether Iwagakure will join the sand village and combine forces to ambush us in the Land of Rain, someone asked, voice filled with doubt. Rest assured, Uchiha Hayashi replied with a composed voice, if Raza and Ebizo dare to ambush us, I will join Hanzo and personally lead the Rain Ninja in a counterattack. Why Hayashi had not killed Hanzo was simple, first, to allow him time to stabilize the Land of Rain, and second, to draw him into the larger conflict. The agreement between the two parties was clear. Konoha would confine its operations within the Land of Earth, and Konoha would abide by that. In turn, Hanzo agreed to ensure the safety of Konoha's supply lines. If the hidden sand village attempted to sabotage those convoys, he was responsible for stopping them. Moreover, Hanzo bore a seal that compelled his obedience despite his reluctance. Of course, to secure his cooperation, the third Hokage had promised Hanzo certain benefits. After all, no one works without compensation. Only the third Hokage and Hanzo knew the exact terms of the agreement, but it was rooted in confidence in their personal strength. Uchiha Hayashi believed that with himself and Hanzo, they could block the hidden sand forces led by Raza and Ebizo. Should they fail, the third Hokage would personally join the fight. The third Hokage was far from weak. In a single sentence, he could be described as the shared disciple of both the first Hokage, Senju Hashirama, and the second Hokage, Senju Tobirama. He possessed mastery over all known ninjutsu within Konoha except bloodline limits and forbidden jutsu, a level of skill that surpassed mere replication. Even Orochimaru once said, if he were 10 years younger, he could defeat me instantly. Whether he was jesting or speaking truth, the third Hokage was still in the prime of his strength, a formidable shinobi with overwhelming taijutsu and powerful ranged techniques. If Uchiha Hayashi, the third Hokage, and Hanzo fought together, they would unquestionably be able to hold off the hidden sand forces. Only Hayashi, Tsukumo Hatake, Shikumo, and the third Hokage fully understood this strategy. The lower ranks did not know. From their perspective, seeing Uchiha Hayashi so composed in the face of potential danger ignited their confidence and stirred their spirits. As expected of Lord Hayashi, they said. While Konoha's camp buzzed with laughter and a sense of assured victory, the situation at the hidden sand encampment was far grimmer. Raza sat in his command tent, worry etched into his features as he exhaled deeply. He had not wanted to lead this force, but with the third Kazekage's limited high-level ninja available, he had no choice but to comply. The number of soldiers was not insignificant and appeared formidable at first glance, but most were newly graduated genin meant to be cannon fodder, with only a few veteran fighters among them. Was this mockery aimed at him? Looking down on Raza, and on Konoha's lightning flash and the white fang. The thought was bitter in his chest. In his youth, Raza had unexpectedly awakened magnet release, and became the personal disciple of the third Kazekage. He should have risen to lead the village in the future. He was talented, wealthy, and capable, and life should have been smooth. But after meeting Uchiha Hayashi during the Second Great Ninja War, everything changed. First, his right arm was severed and he barely escaped. During the Chunin exams he was publicly defeated, thrown into a trash bin. In the Third Great Ninja War, as a commander, his left arm was cut off. Even the girl who had quietly loved him was kidnapped, her fate unknown. Uchiha Hayashi had become a living nightmare in Raza's life. If he could go back in time, Raza thought, he would slap his younger self and tell him never to provoke that name. But there was no going back. Now he had to face his deepest fear again. Before departing, the third Kazekage had instructed him, if the enemy remained confined to the land of rain, and did not seek to open a second front in the land of wind, then do not provoke Konoha. The meaning was simple, avoid conflict if possible. The hidden sand was already stretched thin. A significant number of sand ninja had been pulled back to defend against Hayashi's possible invasion, weakening their front lines. Meanwhile, Orochimaru and Tsunade led a brutal offensive against wind forces, turning the land of wind battles into a slaughterhouse. Both sides suffered heavy casualties. If Uchiha Hayashi and Tsukumo Hatake were to lead their troops into the land of wind now, the pressure on the hidden sand village would multiply. While combining with Iwagakure to block them in rain seemed a decent strategy, sacrificing valuable ninja to multiple fronts risked ruin. More importantly, their supply lines were already fragile. After Hanzo's attacks, the hidden sand could not afford long marches into the land of rain while under assault by Orochimaru. The third Kazekage's instruction was clear, preserve strength, do not provoke Uchiha Hayashi or Tsukumo Hatake, and let them move into the land of earth. Just as Raza sank into his troubled thoughts, the tent flap lifted. A young boy with red hair entered with an easy stride. Seeing him, Raza's face brightened. Sasori, you're here, Raza said, relief touching his tone. The hidden sand's forces were stretched thin, and a genius like Sasori had been sent to the front long ago. But the situation was so dire that Chiyo had allowed her cherished grandson to join the front lines alongside Ebizo. Yes, big brother Raza, what are you doing? Sasori asked with an unusually gentle smile, his eyes gleaming with respect. Such admiration warmed Raza's heart. He reached out and ruffled Sasori's hair, smiling. I'm thinking about how to deal with the Konoha forces. Sasori's smile briefly froze under the gesture, but he recovered quickly. Have you thought of a strategy yet? Raza shook his head. Maybe we could use poison. I have developed some very potent toxins, and right now there's no known antidote, Sasori suggested earnestly. Raza laughed, a booming tone that filled the tent. You young man, even if you had poison that's strong, it wouldn't matter. There's a medic on their side named Yakushi Nono, Tsunade's disciple. Her medical skills are excellent. Unlike his teacher, the third Kazekage, Raza genuinely liked Sasori, partly because Chiyo was the boy's grandmother. Raza aspired to be the fourth Kazekage someday, and fostering a good relationship with Sasori now was strategic as well as affectionate. He was slightly puzzled, however. They say Chiyo's grandson is extremely introverted. Is that a rumor, or is my affinity unusually strong? Sasori's gentle smile remained. Big brother Raza, he said softly. Raza replied. Let's test out some ninjutsu, Sasori suggested with a quiet eagerness. I still want to see how magnet release actually performs in battle. Raza considered for a moment and then nodded. All right, let's go. This time I will demonstrate the magnet release, Iron Sand World method. This technique has only been mastered by myself and the third Kazekage. I'll drop one bonus chapter for every 10 reviews. Leave a review/comment. One bonus chapter will be released for every 100. Power Stones. Read 80-100 chapters ahead on P at Trian. Chapter 504, 504, Akatsuki's arrival at the sand frontline. 1120 words from an outsider's perspective. Sasori's behavior had become increasingly difficult to understand. He had always disliked anyone touching his hair, yet he allowed Raza to pat his head without resistance, even going as far as calling him Nisan in a tone that carried a strange sense of attachment. More than that, Sasori, who once showed interest only in puppetry, had recently begun paying close attention to magnet release techniques. The shift was unsettling. It felt as out of place as Jiraiya suddenly abandoning his usual habits to devote himself entirely to something completely different. The contrast was too sharp to ignore. As Sasori's great-uncle and the one who had watched him grow up, Ebizo noticed these changes immediately. In fact, across the entire Sunagakure camp, he might have been the only one who did. Because of past incidents involving Sasori's parents, the relationship between Chiyo and her grandson had long been strained. Though she had tried to reach out, every attempt ended in failure, leaving only deeper wounds between them. Over time, the distance between the two had grown wider. The only person who had once bridged that gap, Kochi, had died during a mission. Kochi had been Sasori's sole companion growing up, his only true friend. Yet even after Kochi's death, Sasori displayed almost no visible grief. Instead, he turned Kochi's body into a human puppet. Such an act was forbidden within Sunagakure. Though Chiyo was shocked by the level of skill Sasori displayed, she destroyed the puppet without hesitation and punished him severely. Fearing that he might stray further down a dangerous path, she later sent him to the battlefield, hoping war would force him to understand the value of life. It was there that Sasori met Raza. The two quickly became close, at least on the surface. Sasori appeared to admire Raza greatly, and their interactions seemed natural enough. But intentions were not always visible. Ebizo had been quietly observing Sasori for a long time. His vigilance had begun after the mysterious death of Sasori's Chunin-sensei. Though there was no proof, his instincts told him Sasori might have been involved. He did not want to believe it. Still, he continued watching. And the signs only grew more troubling. Sasori's treatment of Kochi's corpse, the way he looked at the third Kazekage as if examining an object rather than a person, his sudden closeness with Raza, and his secret accumulation of rare materials, many of which were used for creating poisons, all of it painted a disturbing picture. Ebizo had considered telling Chiyo many times. But each time, he hesitated. Sasori was still a child. Clinging to that thought, Ebizo approached the two boys. Above them, golden sand filled the sky, forming a massive inverted pyramid under Raza's control. As Raza brought his hands together, the structure spun rapidly before crashing into the ground, leaving behind a deep crater. Sasori, look. This is the gold dust Great Triangle. The power is impressive, right? Raza said, unable to hide his satisfaction. At Sasori's request, he had already demonstrated several magnet release techniques in succession, and the strain was beginning to show in his breathing. Sasori gave a small nod, his gray eyes fixed on the aftermath of the technique. His gaze was sharp, calculating, already dissecting its strengths and weaknesses. He was not admiring it. He was studying it. It seemed that sparring with Raza would be necessary at some point. After finishing his demonstration, Raza turned toward Ebizo, a polite smile forming on his face. Ebizo Sr., what brings you here? Are you looking for Sasori? Compared to the third Kazekage's arrogance, Raza's approachable manner was far more pleasant. Ebizo shook his head. Something has come up at the base. It requires your attention. He kept his explanation brief. With Sasori present, sensitive matters could not be discussed openly. Raza understood at once. He glanced at Sasori. Stay here for a while. We need to talk. Sasori replied with a small smile. The moment Raza and Ebizo turned away, that smile vanished completely. His expression became cold and detached, as if the warmth from moments ago had never existed. Inside the command tent, the two men sat down. What happened? Raza asked. Although both held command positions, Ebizo's experience and seniority meant that most reports reached him first. 2 reconnaissance teams were sent out yesterday, Ebizo said. They haven't returned. Raza frowned. That shouldn't happen under normal circumstances. Have you searched for them? Ebizo's tone grew heavier. We found them. Raza's eyes narrowed. Who was responsible? However, nearby civilians reported sightings of Amigakure ninja. Raza paused for a moment. Amigakure. Anyone paying attention could see that Hanzo had aligned himself with Konoha. If Amigakure was involved, it raised an important question. Was this an independent action, or did it represent Konoha's intent? Before they could discuss further, a ninja appeared at the entrance of the tent. Ebizo-sama, a group of Amigakure ninja has arrived outside the base. They claim to be from an organization called Akatsuki, and request to meet with you. The lower-ranked ninja were unaware of the slain reconnaissance teams, and under Ebizo and Raza's restraint, no immediate conflict had broken out. The group consisted of around 50 individuals, all wearing Amigakure headbands. Their clothing, however, differed from standard uniforms. At the front stood 3 figures. Yahiko, Konan, and Nagato, whose long hair obscured his eyes. This time, Yahiko had come prepared. He understood that arriving with only a handful of people would lead to dismissal. With numbers behind him, he ensured his presence would be taken seriously. After receiving the report, Raza and Ebizo stepped out, moving through the gathered crowd until they faced the group. The two sides stopped about 100 meters apart, maintaining a cautious distance. Yahiko rested both hands on the hilt of a sword planted in the ground before him. His voice carried across the space, steady and firm. Sunagakure ninja, why have you entered the land of rain? Raza's eyes narrowed slightly. If reconnaissance within that region was considered intrusion, then technically, they had crossed that line. But that was not the real issue. Since when did Amigakure have the authority to question Sunagakure like this? You seem mistaken, Raza replied coldly. We are still within the land of wind. We have not entered the land of rain. On what grounds do you call this an invasion? He paused briefly before continuing. More importantly, Hanzo has already aligned himself with Konoha. Now you appear here in his name. What exactly is your intention? Is this meant to provoke Sunagakure? The air grew tense. 50 against 50, both sides stood their ground. Chapter 505, 505. Clash with the Akatsuki. Seeing Raza so aggressive, Yahiko only furrowed his brow slightly, then raised his right hand, signaling the restless subordinates behind him to quiet down. You misunderstand. We are Akatsuki, not Hanzo's subordinates. We are an organization from the land of rain seeking peace. Yahiko spoke calmly, briefly outlining Akatsuki's philosophy of non-violent non-cooperation, before continuing, we do not object to your forces being stationed at the border, but entering the land of rain to attack civilians, that is unacceptable, isn't it? Earlier today, while on a mission, Ida discovered that several small towns in the land of rain had been attacked. Investigation revealed the attackers were Sunagakure ninja. Though both sides had fought briefly, the intruders managed to escape. Most members of Akatsuki abhorred the idea of harming civilians. Nagato, for example, had lost his parents to Konoha ninja. This principle drove Yahiko and the others to intervene today, hoping for formal negotiations with Sunagakure. As soon as Yahiko finished speaking, discontent rippled through the Sunagakure forces. Being one of the 5 great nations, how could they accept being accused of such actions? Ridiculous. This is pure slander. Sunagakure ninja retorted angrily. Ebizo's expression tightened. Your Excellency, if you intend to make accusations, you must present proof. Although most great nations' ninjas avoided harming civilians, occasional misconduct was overlooked as long as it remained secret. Being publicly accused, however, threatened Sunagakure's reputation. Yahiko nodded. We have evidence. 100 li from here, 3 small towns were attacked. If you doubt us, verify for yourselves. Survivors from those villages can confirm our account. And yes, Sunagakure ninja engaged us but escaped, leaving the evidence behind. Raza's expression grew grave. He remembered the 2 squads that had been lost. His gaze sharpened as he exchanged a look with Ebizo. At that moment, a sharp voice rang from the Sunagakure ranks. It's them. Nanmu and Ashiki led a squad to scout, and haven't returned. They must be the ones responsible. Raza and Yahiko both reacted. Raza had hoped this issue would remain undisclosed. The 3rd Kazekage had strictly ordered that Sunagakure ninja avoid conflicts, unless Konoha attacked the Land of Wind. If word spread that Sunagakure ninja had died in the Land of Rain, the lower ranks would erupt in fury. Raza lacked the prestige to suppress such outrage, and Ebizo could not control the subordinates either. The crowd's voices rose. Those brats from the Land of Rain actually dare attack us. Kill them. Yahiko's expression darkened. Some Sunagakure ninja had indeed survived, and some accounts might be false. If lies, then Sunagakure had been set up. If true, Akatsuki had committed a grave offense. Yahiko, along with his 50 comrades, maintained an air of grievance, silently asking, "What's your problem?" To Raza the display was a performance. Our Sunagakure ninja were killed, yet you accuse us of attacking civilians in the Land of Rain. Convincing lies passed as truth, a skill akin to Taknojutsu. Regardless of Yahiko's actual intent, Raza had to respond. His subordinates were enraged, demanding action. As commander, he needed to assert authority. He focused first on Yahiko, underestimating the Rain ninja. Besides Hanzo, he assumed the Land of Rain lacked high-level fighters. Akatsuki was small at this stage, and Raza had misjudged them before, just as he had misjudged Hayashi years ago. Confident, Raza struck first. Magnet release, gold dust shuriken. Gold-encrusted shuriken flew from his hands. At the same time, Konan launched her paper shuriken jutsu. The clash was a duel of extremes, the most expensive shuriken against the simplest, the difference in quality undeniable. Raza's gold dust shurikens crushed through their opponents effortlessly. Yahiko stepped forward, using wind release, gale palm, not to attack but to deflect. Raza countered with magnet release, gold dust wave, rolling dense sheets of gold across the battlefield. Yahiko spat out a torrent of water release, violent water wave, attempting to wash away the sand. Yet the gold dust absorbed his chakra, resisting his attack. Raza crossed his arms, disdain etched on his face. Mixed with gold dust of this quality, your water release cannot block it. Surrounding ninjas could only watch in awe. Raza had once again felt the thrill of overwhelming power. But before he could fully revel, Nagato moved. Without words, without hand seals, he appeared in front of Konan and Yahiko, raising only his right hand. The gold dust wave froze midair, drained of its momentum. Raza's shock was clear. Control of the gold dust had slipped. From the sky, golden particles rained down, dazzling the battlefield. I'll drop 1 bonus chapter for every 10 reviews. Leave a review/comment. 1 bonus chapter will be released for every 100. Power Stones. Read 100 plus chapters ahead on Patreon. Chapter 506. 506. Sunagakure's decision to declare war. 1191 words. The red-haired ninja stood amid the drifting sand, his expression shifting with uncertainty as he faced a phenomenon he had never encountered before. If Hayashi was an ordinary player, then Raza was a pay-to-win type of player. But even pay-to-win players had limits. Against someone with a cheat-like ability, even overwhelming resources could lose their meaning. Raza narrowed his eyes, clearly unsettled. Magnet release, in simple terms, was the conversion of refined chakra into magnetic force to control metallic substances. Both the gold dust and sand were still present in the battlefield, yet they were no longer under his command. That did not mean his technique had been neutralized, but rather that his chakra had been absorbed entirely. This was the first time Raza had encountered a shinobi capable of directly absorbing chakra. He wanted to continue testing the strength of the red-haired ninja in front of him, but Hayashi and the others had already taken advantage of the opening to retreat and widen the distance. The situation shifted immediately. Hidden sand ninjas, what is the meaning of this? Hayashi asked again, his tone carrying restrained anger. Ebizo stepped forward, his expression cold. You are suspected of murdering Sunagakure shinobi. You will remain here for investigation. At his signal, several ninjas emerged rapidly from the surroundings, closing in on the members of Akatsuki. Hayashi gritted his teeth and glanced at his subordinates. The Sunagakure camp was right ahead, and their numbers were overwhelming. If they were surrounded, there would be no escape. As soon as the command was given, Conan brought her hands together and clapped lightly. In an instant, paper tags hidden beneath the ground rose into view. Explosive tags. There were at least 100 of them, clearly prepared in advance to prevent pursuit. Conan formed hand seals. A chain reaction of explosions erupted across the field. Heat waves surged outward, kicking up dense yellow sand that swallowed visibility and forced the pursuing ninjas to halt their advance. Raza reacted instantly, forming a hand sign. Sand rose up like a massive barrier, shielding Sunagakure's forces from the blast. When the explosions finally faded, the members of Akatsuki had already vanished without a trace. Inside the main command tent of Sunagakure, a shinobi with a dark expression and a white headscarf slammed his fist down. We cannot let the rain ninjas get away with this. He was referring to Amigakure. Although Hayashi had tried to explain the situation, no one had truly listened. In their eyes, he was simply another subordinate of Hanzo. If they were Hanzo's people, then Hanzo would naturally bear responsibility. Hanzo, the so-called demigod of the ninja world, had once been defeated by Konoha's Yellow Flash, and his deterrence had weakened significantly. Even if he still held his title, so what? A small country like the Land of Rain had no right to provoke Sunagakure. In the hierarchy of the ninja world, a clear chain of contempt existed. Konoha looked down on the 5 great nations, the 5 great nations looked down on each other, and all of them looked down on smaller countries. Sunagakure, having suffered the humiliation of losing the 3rd Kazekage to Konoha, sat even lower in perception among the great powers. To them, small nations were nothing more than tools, buffers, or disposable pawns. Amigakure, as the strongest of the minor villages due to Hanzo's presence, occupied a slightly higher position in that hierarchy, but it was still insignificant in the eyes of the great nations. The death of Sunagakure ninjas at the hands of so-called rain ninjas could not simply be ignored. If they stayed silent, it would only damage Sunagakure's standing. This was why many lower-ranking shinobi demanded retaliation against the Land of Rain. However, Raza and Ebizo remained silent. Amigakure itself was not the real concern. Konoha was. Konoha and Hanzo were currently allied. A direct invasion of the Land of Rain could easily be interpreted as hostility toward Konoha. We do not have time to worry about Sunagakure right now. Their forces are clearly moving toward the Land of Earth, someone in the tent said. The concentration of troops near Iwagakure's border was far greater than here. It was obvious that a larger conflict was brewing. Inoki had already begun maneuvering, seeking alliances to counter Konoha. Sunagakure and Iwagakure had long maintained an alliance, strengthened further by mutual opposition to Konoha. But this time, the 3rd Kazekage had given no clear response to Inoki's proposal. That silence was effectively a refusal. Every major village was calculating for itself. Iwagakure wanted Sunagakure to act as pressure against Konoha. Sunagakure wanted Konoha distracted in the Land of Rain so they could focus elsewhere. Konoha wanted to keep the Land of Rain as a buffer against surprise attacks. And because of Danzo's interference, the situation had become even more unstable. In the end, Sunagakure found itself trapped in the middle. Raza and Ebizo exchanged a glance, both aware of the same truth. They were being pushed forward by circumstances they could no longer control. Finally, Ebizo made his decision. We will advance into the Land of Rain and declare war on Hanzo. Only Hanzo. He still hoped the distinction would be understood, that Konoha would not misinterpret their actions. But even as he said it, he understood how naive that hope was. A heavy silence settled over him. Meanwhile, in a cave deep within the Land of Rain, Hayashi sat facing his companions as tension filled the air. A man in black robes spoke first. Why don't we just drop this? Sunagakure is not someone we can afford to provoke. He did not say the rest aloud, but his meaning was clear. Even Hanzo would struggle against Sunagakure. For people like them, getting involved would only mean getting crushed in the aftermath. But we cannot just let Sunagakure slaughter the civilians of the Land of Rain, Cusick frowned. That is not the main issue right now, Conan said softly after a pause. They might declare war on the entire Land of Rain. Hayashi fell silent for a moment. He had already considered that possibility. If the Land of Rain was dragged fully into war, the civilians would suffer without end. Send word to Hanzo immediately, and also to Konoha, Hayashi said. Sunagakure is stationed at the border. Even if they claim to be targeting only the Land of Rain, Konoha must be prepared. I will go, Conan said immediately. Nagato glanced at her, a slight dissatisfaction flashing in his eyes. He had intended to go himself, but Conan had spoken first. He did not like Konoha, yet the commander there was Tsukumo, and more importantly, he wanted to see what had become of those people from the past. Conan noticed his expression and subtly smiled to herself. Hayashi did not notice the quiet exchange between them. His thoughts remained fixed on the future of the Land of Rain. This situation started because of Akatsuki, he said finally. If war breaks out, whether to protect the civilians or to correct our mistake, Akatsuki will take part in it. Chapter 507, 507. The Rinnegan 1191 words. Yahiko's decision to enter the war was not approved by everyone. Many ninjas of Amigakure had joined Akatsuki precisely to escape the endless wars. Now that peace was still out of reach, they were being pulled back into another conflict. No one wanted to die after finally finding a place to belong. But as the leader, Yahiko had already made his decision. The rest could only follow. In truth, none of them could ignore what had happened. Everything had started because of Akatsuki, and they had a responsibility to respond. Conan, however, was not thinking about the war at all. She was instead focused on something far more important to her right now, a meeting gift. Since it was a reunion after so many years, they could not arrive empty-handed. What exactly counted as an appropriate gift became a serious discussion between Conan and Nagato during their journey back. Despite both of them being quiet by nature, they argued about it the entire way, yet still reached no conclusion. Nagato suggested they follow the past. When they parted years ago, Tatsumi had given them kunai for self-defense. So he proposed bringing kunai in return. Conan immediately rejected the idea. That was not a gift, it was just returning a favor in the most meaningless way possible. Bringing 3 kunai to a reunion would only make things awkward. Nagato then suggested local specialties from the Land of Rain. Conan rejected that even faster. The Land of Rain had no proper specialty worth mentioning. The climate was too damp, and the most famous things there were poisonous mushrooms that could barely be considered food. In the end, Yahiko made the final decision with a wave of his hand. Conan would bring 2 flame chickens to cook. Conan wanted to object, but Akatsuki had no money or resources for anything better, so she could only accept it and seal the small animals away in a scroll. Before she left, Yahiko repeatedly reminded her that this was a mission to deliver information, not a casual visit. Conan nodded seriously. Then immediately forgot it. When she arrived at the Konoha encampment, she was stopped by patrol ninjas. "Who goes there?" the leading shinobi asked sharply, eyes filled with caution. Conan raised her hand slightly to show she was not hostile. "My name is Conan. I am from Amigakure. Lord Hanzo sent me to deliver an important message to Lord Tatsumi." She did not mention Akatsuki. After several failed attempts at diplomacy, she had learned that Hanzo's name carried far more weight than Akatsuki's. However, the Konoha shinobi did not relax. "Amigakure has established official communication protocols with us. There is no need to send a personal messenger." Conan froze slightly. Her cover had been seen through immediately. After a brief pause, she changed her approach. "I am Lord Jiraiya's disciple, and I also know Lord Tatsumi. I have urgent intelligence regarding Sunagakure." As she spoke, she took out a white paper flower from her pocket. "Please report this. Tell him Conan is here. Or Nawaki, the one who looks a little foolish, or Mikoto, a very beautiful girl." The guards exchanged glances. Those were all names they recognized. If she truly had intelligence regarding Sunagakure, then this could be classified information. After a moment of hesitation, the captain nodded. "Stay here. I will report this." The rest of the team remained alert, surrounding her to prevent any possible escape. Conan stood quietly, looking toward the Konoha encampment. A faint sense of hesitation rose in her chest. She suddenly wondered if she had been too impulsive. When they first met, they were all children. Tatsumi and the others were only a few years older than her. 8 years had passed in the blink of an eye. Would they still remember the 3 children they once met by chance in the Land of Rain? For Conan, that memory was special. It was the first time she had felt warmth in a world filled with suffering. That moment, along with her time under Jiraiya, became something she treasured deeply. Yahiko and Nagato felt the same way. That was why they often returned to that old cave, holding on to the past. But for Tatsumi and the others, it might not have meant the same thing at all. Perhaps they had simply seen them as passing orphans and forgotten them completely. She did not like that possibility. Conan lightly touched her chest, where a kunai was hidden. That moment had become one of the reasons she began taking ninjutsu seriously. Before that, she had simply followed Yahiko and Nagato wherever they went. Her thoughts were interrupted. A shadow flashed across the air. Tatsumi arrived at high speed from the main tent, followed by Nawaki and Mikoto. Conan's expression, which had been slightly clouded with doubt, instantly brightened. A genuine smile appeared on her face. Inside the main tent, Tatsumi took a sip of tea and looked at Conan with mild curiosity. "So Conan, how did you end up as Hanzo's subordinate?" Conan was currently helping Mikoto prepare the flame chickens. She looked up casually and stuck out her tongue. "I am not. I just used his name. If I said Akatsuki, no one would have taken me seriously." Akatsuki was still an unknown organization at this stage. On the side, Nawaki laughed. "That is not good, Conan. If you want to build reputation, you have to use your organization's name more often. People in the ninja world like that sort of thing. Strong mysterious identities are not popular anymore. For example, I call myself Konoha's Sea King." Conan covered her mouth and laughed. She thought Nawaki had not changed at all, still as foolish as before. Nawaki did not notice her thoughts and simply grinned back. He had not expected the 3 children they once helped to survive were actually Jiraiya's disciples. Not only were they alive, they had even formed an organization called Akatsuki. "Naruto." "Nagato," Nawaki muttered as if remembering something important. "Isn't the protagonist of Big Brother Jiraiya's novel that gloomy red-haired kid?" Yes, Conan replied with a smile, but Nagato is not gloomy. I do not agree, Nawaki said, crossing his arms. That kid can be the main character, but I am stuck as a supporting role. Conan laughed again, finding herself laughing more than she had in a long time. When she smiled, dimples appeared on her cheeks. Tatsumi glanced at her for a moment, slightly distracted. He had not expected to meet Conan again like this. At one point, he had thought their next meeting would be as enemies. Reality, however, had taken a different turn. Conan today was not the cold and distant figure she would become in the future. That likely meant Yahiko was still alive. Nagato's condition was probably the same. Then the question remained. Now that Madara was confirmed dead, should he take Nagato's Rinnegan? I'll drop one bonus chapter for every 10 reviews. Leave a review/comment. One bonus chapter will be released for every 100 Power Stones. Read 100 plus chapters ahead on Patreon. Chapter 508. 508. Intercepting the Sunagakure army alone. 1143 words. Hayashi thought it through carefully, yet the timing still felt off. His objective in obtaining the Rinnegan was simple, either destroy it or use it for himself. Destroying it, however, was not an option. If Hayashi wanted to prevent the Ten Tails from appearing or stop the infinite Tsukuyomi from being activated, then destroying the Rinnegan now would be the most effective solution. But the problem was that his own plan required the use of the infinite Tsukuyomi. At this point, he was no different from Black Zetsu, waiting in silence for everything to fall into place so he could claim the final result. But awakening the Rinnegan came at too great a cost. Hayashi was not confident he could achieve it on his own. If he failed, then the pair of eyes left behind by Uchiha Madara would remain the only Rinnegan in existence. Because of that, it absolutely could not be destroyed yet. As for taking it now, that was even worse. His Mangekyo Sharingan had only reached a moderate stage of development. Even if he obtained the Rinnegan, he would not be able to transplant it yet. Since it would not be his own eyes, he would be unable to use its full power. Worse still, if he took it without being able to use it, it would become a burden instead. Black Zetsu and Uchiha Fugaku would do anything to retrieve it. Hayashi was strong, but not invincible. There were still too many uncertainties he could not fully control. There was also another problem. If he held the Rinnegan and wanted to use the infinite Tsukuyomi, he would have to personally carry out the Eye of the Moon plan. But with his current identity, capturing tailed beasts from other villages would be the same as Konoha declaring war on the entire ninja world. Even in history, when Uchiha Obito moved to capture the 8 Tails and 9 Tails, it escalated into a full-scale war. Compared to that, it was far better to let the Akatsuki handle such matters. There was no need for him to step into the spotlight and become everyone's target. Remaining behind the scenes, waiting until the right moment to take everything, that was the smarter choice. In the end, the conclusion was clear. Now was not the time. With the matter settled, Hayashi finally relaxed. For once, he allowed himself to enjoy a brief moment of peace. He dragged a chair near the entrance of the tent and sat down at an angle. Outside, heavy rain poured endlessly. From the corner of his eye, he could see Uchiha Mikoto sitting calmly, while Conan, still slightly flustered, was gradually relaxing. What began as restraint soon turned into light conversation. Conan even started making small jokes with Nawaki. It felt. Hayashi hugged his knees, resting his chin on them. Listening to the steady rhythm of rain and Conan's soft laughter, his eyes slowly closed. Before long, he drifted into sleep. By the time he woke up, the meal was ready. A rich spread filled the table: teriyaki chicken rice, grilled chicken, hand rolls, and a pan-fried salamander dish. As expected from Mikoto and Conan, everything looked and smelled excellent. Sitting down, Hayashi smiled lightly. Eat more salamander. It's good for your skin. Nawaki froze. Looking at the pile in his bowl, his expression twisted slightly. He clearly remembered it being said to boost something else entirely. He had been eating it every meal lately. At this point, he was sick of it. Poking at the food with his chopsticks, he quickly lost his appetite. Conan, on the other hand, showed no such hesitation. Despite her gentle appearance, her eating style was anything but slow. She ate quickly, almost as if afraid the food might disappear. It was likely a habit from her childhood, when food had been scarce. Mikoto ate more gracefully, taking small bites. Hayashi followed suit, picking up a roll and eating at a steady pace. After finishing several pieces of salamander, Conan paused and looked at Hayashi. How do you plan to deal with the Sunagakure forces? Hayashi picked up a piece of carrot, lightly tapping his chopsticks to shake off the garnish before speaking. We will intercept them at the border of the Land of Rain. Even without Conan's report, Konoha had already been tracking Sunagakure's movements, including the appearance of the Akatsuki at their camp. Still, hearing her first-hand account made one thing obvious. It was a setup. The entire situation carried the clear scent of manipulation, meant to provoke conflict between Sunagakure and Hanzo. His first thought was Uchiha Fugaku. Ever since the war in the Land of Water ended, Fugaku had remained with the troops. Hayashi had deliberately kept him close rather than letting him return to the village. Whether he was trustworthy or not, it was better to keep him under watch. Fugaku had also kept a low profile. Within the Uchiha clan, no one even considered him a candidate for clan head anymore. At this point, the position was practically decided. Once the war ended, Hayashi would take it. As for Shimura Danzo, Hayashi dismissed the idea quickly. The moon was currently in the Land of Hot Water, making his involvement unlikely. If anything, Fugaku was taking the blame for something Danzo had nothing to do with. Conan frowned slightly. The Sunagakure army isn't small. And you're also dealing with Iwagakure. Can you handle it? There was no suspicion in her tone, only concern. Hayashi smiled faintly. It's not as difficult as you think. This time, I will intercept them alone. Conan blinked, stunned. There are at least 2,000 ninja. Even their entire group would not dare confront such a force, yet Hayashi intended to do it by himself. 1 against 2,000. It sounded absurd. Seeing her reaction, Hayashi sighed as if mildly annoyed. You really have that little faith in me. I invaded Kirigakure alone and destroyed it. Even Hanzo cannot defeat me. At the very least, I can be considered one of the strongest in the world right now. Conan smiled slightly, glancing at Nawaki and Mikoto. Neither of them seemed worried. Hayashi continued, I won't be entirely alone. Hanzo and the third Hokage will join me. He paused, then looked at her. As for the Akatsuki, Conan immediately straightened. What do you need us to do? Hayashi shook his head. You don't need to do anything. Stay away from this battlefield. His gaze hardened slightly. That's enough. Conan fell silent for a moment before nodding. In the autumn of Konoha's 38th year, Sunagakure forces gathered at the edge of the Land of Wind, and officially declared war on the Land of Rain. Smoke rose across the desert. At the border 3 figures stood firm, facing an army of 2,000. Chapter 509, 509, The Three Shadows. 1051 words. I never thought there would be a day I'd fight alongside both of you. Standing in the endless desert, Hanzo spoke with a faint emotional tone. Not long ago, both sides were still enemies. A month ago, he had even been a prisoner of Konoha. Yet now, he was standing side by side with the third Hokage, and Konoha's lightning flash, preparing to face the Sunagakure army together. If anyone heard this, they would never believe it. To his right stood Hiruzen Sarutobi, the third Hokage, wearing a faint smile. On his other side was Hayashi, equally composed. The 3 of them could be said to be the peak combat forces of the entire ninja world. Rarely in history had 3 Kage-level fighters gathered on the same battlefield as allies. During Hashirama Senju's era, Konoha had the strength to do so, but it was unnecessary. The first Hokage alone was enough to dominate any battlefield. At the peak of the Sannin era, such a formation might have been possible, but Tsunade was bedridden and unable to fight, while Orochimaru had already defected. The remaining Sannin were never aligned. Even the Akatsuki of the future rarely gathered such strength in one place, often working in pairs and gradually falling one by one when isolated. Because of that, this kind of lineup, assembled without Edo Tensei, was almost unheard of. Hiruzen let out a light chuckle. Hayashi, when the battle starts, stay behind me. This had not been part of the original plan. The third Hokage had insisted on coming personally. Not because he wanted glory, but because this battle mattered too much. Hayashi's previous operation in Kirigakure had already shifted the tide of the war. This interception of Tsunagakure would further tilt the entire conflict in Konoha's favor. It was easy to assume that 2,000 Tsunagakure shinobi would mean nothing against Hayashi and Hanzo combined, but reality was more complicated. Kirigakure had dense mist, terrain advantages, and internal chaos involving civilians and the Six Tails, making large-scale annihilation easier. This battlefield was different. An open desert offered no cover at all. Even for Hayashi, repeating the same kind of suppression would be far more difficult. At least, that was Hiruzen's judgment. And because of that, he refused to leave everything solely to the younger generation. Still, Hayashi found the situation complicated. He did not doubt Hiruzen's strength, but the Hokage represented the highest authority of Konoha. If anything happened to him here, the consequences would be unpredictable. Even if the enemy was only 2,000 Tsunagakure ninja led by Raza and Ebizo, they would swarm like beasts if they detected an opportunity. Hayashi looked at Hiruzen with concern, but the third Hokage simply shook his head. Don't worry about me. Dividing your attention in battle will only slow you down. Hanzo glanced sideways and spoke flatly. If I die here at the hands of Tsunagakure, I probably won't even have a body left to recover. His tone was indifferent. I'll say this clearly. If I die, everything ends. But if you die, Konoha must remove the curse seal on me and honor the agreement. He had not come only to avoid dragging the Land of Rain into war, but also because he was bound by the curse seal and Konoha's control. Hiruzen waved a hand dismissively. Don't worry. Even if I die, Konoha will still keep its word. He paused briefly. Besides, let's not talk as if defeat is certain. This is not a death trap. If it truly were hopeless, he would never have come. With Hayashi, who had already invaded and withdrawn from Kirigakure alive, and Hanzo, who had held the Land of Rain together for years, plus himself, there was no reason to fear 2,000 Tsunagakure shinobi. And importantly, the third Kazekage was absent. Without him, Ebizo alone was not enough to be decisive. As for Raza, Hiruzen did not even consider him a threat. Silence settled over the group. Tsunagakure had not yet appeared. The third Hokage looked out across the desert and spoke again. The Land of Wind. The last time I came here was before the Second Great Ninja War. He glanced at Hanzo. Do you remember? Hanzo nodded. Of course. Back then, you, me, and the third Kazekage fought in different directions. We clashed from the border of the Land of Fire all the way through the Land of Wind, and ended up in the Land of Rain. None of us could truly defeat the others. A rare sense of excitement surfaced in Hanzo's expression. These days, he had been burdened with ruling the Land of Rain. It had been a long time since he felt like this. Hiruzen laughed. That was the most satisfying battle I've had since becoming Hokage. Before that, I'd have to go back to the First Great Ninja War. It's a pity. After becoming Hokage, opportunities like that became fewer and fewer. He turned slightly, glancing at Hayashi. I was born during the time when the Senju and Uchiha clans were still in constant conflict. By the time I was old enough to understand things, the Warring States period was already ending. I haven't actually experienced that many large-scale wars compared to people like Orochimaru or Tsunade. That peace was thanks to Lord First Hokage. Only he could suppress the entire ninja world for so long. Hiruzen's voice lowered slightly. As Hokage, I have failed in some ways. I let you younger ones grow up in war. Hayashi listened quietly. He did not interrupt. Hiruzen then changed his tone. Back then, Lord Second Hokage sacrificed himself for the younger generation. I will do the same today. If anything happens, Hayashi, you retreat first. Do not worry about me. The position of fourth Hokage will go to your teacher Orochimaru. Understand? Hayashi replied firmly, I understand. In the next instant, Hiruzen's chakra surged outward without restraint. He grabbed a handful of sand, letting it slip through his fingers as the wind scattered it across the sky. Then he stepped forward and charged towards Tsunagakure. I'll drop one bonus chapter for every 10 reviews, leave a review/comment. One bonus chapter will be released for every 100 power stones. Read 100 plus chapters ahead on Patreon, Chapter 510, Intercepting Tsunagakure 1015 words, I never thought I'd actually get the chance to fight alongside you too. Standing in the desert, Hanzo spoke with a rare hint of emotion in his voice. Just a few months ago, they had been enemies. A month ago, he was still Konoha's prisoner. And now, he was standing side by side with the third Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi, and Konoha's lightning flash, preparing to face the Tsunagakure army. If someone told this story elsewhere, no one would believe it. Hiruzen Sarutobi stood to Hanzo's right, with a faint smile. Further to the right, Hayashi also showed a slight smile. The three of them represented the very peak of the shinobi world. Across all nations, it was almost unheard of for three Kage-level fighters to join forces in a single battle. In Hashirama's era, Konoha had possessed that kind of overwhelming strength, but it was unnecessary. The first Hokage alone was enough to dominate any battlefield. At their strongest, the three Sannin might have matched such a lineup. But circumstances had long since changed. Tsunade could not fight, Orochimaru had left the village, and unity among them was no longer possible. Even the future Akatsuki, despite their strength, operated in pairs. They never assembled fully, and paid the price for it. That made this moment even more extraordinary. Lord Hokage, when the battle begins, please stay behind me, Hayashi said quietly after a brief pause. When the plan was first made, Hiruzen Sarutobi had not been included. But he insisted on coming. Not out of pride, but because the stakes were too high. If Hayashi's attack on Kirigakure had shifted the war in Konoha's favor, then stopping Tsunagakure here would push that advantage even further. Some might argue that since Hayashi had infiltrated the hidden mist village alone, adding Hanzo should be more than enough to handle 2,000 enemy shinobi. But reality was not so simple. Kirigakure had been shrouded in dense mist, making concealment easy. The presence of civilians and the involvement of the tailed beast prevented large-scale engagement. This battlefield was completely different. An open desert. No obstacles. 2,000 Tsunagakure shinobi stood exposed, but so did they. Hiruzen believed this would limit Hayashi's usual aggressive tactics, and he had no intention of letting anything happen to him. At the same time, Konoha's elite forces were spread thin across multiple fronts. Sending reinforcements was not an option. After careful thought, he chose to fight personally. That decision, however, placed pressure on Hayashi. He had no doubt about Hiruzen Sarutobi's strength. But the Hokage was the pillar of the village. No matter the outcome, he could not be allowed to fall. On a chaotic battlefield, even the strongest could be caught off guard. If the enemy discovered the Hokage's presence, they would swarm him without hesitation. Noticing Hayashi's concern, Hiruzen smiled faintly and shook his head. Don't worry about me once the battle begins. If you divide your attention, it will only weaken you. Hanzo glanced at him and spoke flatly, if I die here in the land of wind, at Sunagakure's hands, there may not even be anyone left to recover my body. He paused, then added, let's be clear. If I die, everything ends. But if you die, Konoha must remove the curse seal placed on me. He had his own reasons for being here. Avoiding war for the land of rain was one. The curse seal forcing his cooperation was another. Hiruzen replied calmly, even if I fall, Konoha will honor the agreement. Then his expression hardened slightly. Besides, this is far from a losing battle. With him, Hayashi, and Hanzo present, defeat seemed almost impossible. There was no third Kazekage leading the enemy forces. Ebizo alone was not worth concern. As for Raza, Hiruzen did not even consider him a threat. Silence settled between them. The desert stretched endlessly ahead, waves of golden sand rolling beneath the wind. After a while, Hiruzen spoke again. The last time I came to the land of wind was before the Second Great Ninja War. He glanced at Hanzo. You remember, don't you? Hanzo nodded. Of course. Back then, you, me, and the third Kazekage fought each other one-on-one. We crossed the borders of the land of fire, into the land of wind, and even reached the land of rain. None of us could overpower the others. A trace of pride surfaced in his voice. Those were battles worth remembering. Hiruzen laughed, his tone filled with nostalgia. That was the most satisfying fight I've had since becoming Hokage. He continued, before that, only the first great ninja war compares. But after becoming Hokage, I rarely stepped onto the battlefield. I always wanted one more chance to fight freely like that. He exhaled slowly. I didn't expect that chance to come now. Then his gaze shifted to Hayashi. When I was born, the Senju and Uchiha were still at war. By the time I grew older, that era was ending. I didn't experience as many large-scale wars as your generation. In that sense, I was fortunate. More fortunate than Orochimaru and Tsunade. He paused briefly. That peace existed because of the first Hokage. His voice grew quieter. But I failed to maintain it. You've all had to endure 2 wars already, and now you're here, facing this at such a young age. Hayashi listened without interrupting. Under normal circumstances, these words might never have been spoken. Hiruzen's tone shifted. The second Hokage gave his life to protect us. Today, I'm prepared to do the same. He looked directly at Hayashi. If anything goes wrong, you leave. Do not hesitate. The position of 4th Hokage must go to your teacher, Orochimaru. Do you understand? Hayashi nodded firmly. I understand. In the next moment, Hiruzen's chakra surged outward, powerful and unrestrained. He bent down, scooped up a handful of sand, and let it slip through his fingers. The wind carried it into the sky, scattering it across the horizon. Then he stepped forward. Without hesitation, the third Hokage charged toward the approaching Sunagakure forces. Chapter 511, Collapse under coordinated assault, detected 3 powerful chakra signatures at 9 o'clock. They're moving fast. They're here. Within Sunagakure's formation, even the elite sensor ninja did not need confirmation. Every shinobi on the battlefield could feel it now, 3 overwhelming presences closing in at terrifying speed. This kind of pressure was familiar. They had felt it before from the third Kazekage. Everyone, retreat. Ebizo ordered immediately. Senior Ebizo, who is it? Raza asked urgently. He had not activated his third eye technique, so he could not see the incoming figures clearly. Hanzo, Konoha's lightning flash, and the third Hokage. Ebizo said sharply, each name weighed with gravity. The third Hokage had not appeared on the battlefield in years, but for someone of Ebizo's generation, that chakra signature was impossible to forget. During the first Great Ninja War, he had nearly lost his life to Hiruzen Sarutobi. And now that same man had returned to the battlefield. The third Hokage. Raza's eyes widened in shock. Then, almost immediately, excitement crept into his expression. He grabbed Ebizo's arm. We have 2,000 Sunagakure shinobi, plus the two of us. We can wear them down. Even if we cannot kill them all, taking down the third Hokage alone would mean victory in this war. He clearly intended to repeat what had happened in the past, when coordinated forces had once captured the third Kazekage during the Second Great Ninja War. But Ebizo looked at him like he was looking at a fool. Only when Raza noticed the silence did Ebizo slowly turn away. He removed his large cloak, revealing his combat gear underneath. The younger generation had forgotten what kind of man Hiruzen Sarutobi truly was. In raw power, the third Hokage was not necessarily the strongest among the 5 Kage. In one-on-one combat, he might even lose to someone like the third Raikage in pure physical dominance. But battlefield destruction was a different matter entirely. Hiruzen Sarutobi mastered all 5 nature transformations. One large-scale technique from him could reshape the battlefield itself. And his student had inherited that same style. A coordinated trio of Hanzo, Konoha's lightning flash, and the third Hokage was not something numbers could easily suppress. Human wave tactics did not work against every opponent. If Ebizo had 10,000 shinobi, he might have considered holding them here. But 2,000 was not enough. Still, retreat was no longer possible. The enemy was too close. He exhaled heavily, then his voice, reinforced with chakra, spread across the entire battlefield. At that moment, the third Hokage's figure became visible on the horizon. Behind him was Hayashi, wearing a dark green vest, and further back came Hanzo, his scythe carrying an unmistakable killing intent. The two forces collided head-on. The momentum of Konoha's trio was so overwhelming that Ebizo momentarily felt as if they were the ones being encircled. Many Sunagakure shinobi felt the same unease. In the midst of the formation, Sasori's blood stirred despite himself. For a brief instant, even his normally detached mind felt the urge to step forward into the clash. He blinked. Who am I thinking about? What am I doing? 200 meters separated the armies. Sunagakure's shinobi launched coordinated volleys from both flanks. Specialized wind-up tools fired oversized shuriken and cross-shaped blades across the battlefield. Sunagakure was known for its weapon engineering. Their ranged tools could cover distances ordinary shinobi could not match. But the attacks landed behind the advancing trio. They were too fast. All 3 of them were top-tier speed-type shinobi. Prediction alone was not enough. Realizing this, Sunagakure abandoned ranged suppression and shifted into a full charge. Hayashi's left hand rested on the hilt of Samehada on his back. His Sharingan flared crimson as he observed the enemy formation ahead. He could see everything clearly. The front line was made up of seasoned shinobi. Their breath came out in steady white mist in the cold desert air. These were not rookies. They were veterans placed at the forefront because they were the most reliable. But that did not change what was about to happen. They were marching into death. 30 meters. The 3 Konoha aligned slightly, spreading apart as they advanced. The third Hokage began forming hand seals. Earth release, earth flow river. The ground beneath Sunagakure's front line turned soft and unstable, transforming into a flowing swamp-like terrain that swallowed several shinobi instantly and shattered their formation. Without pause, he followed up again. Wind release, vacuum great sphere. Hayashi completed his seals a fraction later, deliberately timing himself just behind Hiruzen. Then he unleashed his technique. Sage Art Fire Release, Fire Dragon Flame Bullet. The fire surged forward, and with Hiruzen's wind amplification, the flames expanded violently. 3 massive fire dragons merged into one inferno, spreading across the battlefield like a living wall of destruction. The scale surpassed ordinary high-level fire release techniques entirely. Ebizo's expression froze. After a long silence, he muttered, almost in disbelief. They are actually coordinating. He had expected chaos, not synchronized devastation. Hiruzen himself felt a surge of emotion. This level of combination was not ordinary. This is Sage Mode, he thought. Since Hashirama Senju, Konoha has produced it again. The memory of legendary battles resurfaced in his mind. The era of gods among shinobi had returned, even if only briefly. Konoha, once again, had found its answer. I'll drop one bonus chapter for every 10 reviews. Leave a review/comment, one bonus chapter will be released for every 100 power stones. Read 100 plus chapters ahead on Patreon, chapter 512, Breaking the Sand Line with Overwhelming Force 1094 words. Faced with such an unrestrained fire release, Ebizo was briefly stunned before immediately shouting, use water release. Using a counternature technique was the most basic defensive tactic. Still, what shocked Ebizo was that it took nearly 100 Sunagakure ninja working together just to barely suppress the incoming flames. The hidden sand village was located in a dry, barren region, so very few of its ninja specialized in water release. Many did not even possess the water nature, which greatly reduced the effectiveness of their techniques. In the end, they relied on sheer numbers to form a defense, barely managing to extinguish the blazing assault. As the flames faded, a dense fog rapidly spread across the battlefield. Use wind release. Raza immediately commanded, attempting to disperse it. But it was already too late. 3 figures burst through the thick mist and charged straight toward them. At the front was none other than the third Hokage. He wore a black combat outfit with a hooded cape, its protective flaps tightly secured around his head. Running beside him was a white-haired monkey. This was the third Hokage's summoned companion, the legendary Monkey King, Enma, a being known for his indestructible body and hailed as one of the strongest contracted summons. Even Shinosuke Sarutobi had never been able to gain Enma's acknowledgement. Enma was notoriously stubborn. Anyone it did not approve of, even the Hokage's own son, had no chance of forming a contract. Do we really have to fight again? Enma asked, glancing at the massive enemy force. Yeah, sorry to trouble you again, old friend, the third Hokage replied. Enma sighed. Conflict never disappears, no matter the era. After that brief remark, Enma transformed into the adamantine staff. The third Hokage gripped the thick, black staff firmly, adjusting his stance before charging straight into the enemy ranks. His taijutsu needed no explanation. Combined with Enma's ability to extend and contract at will, his movements were precise, powerful, and relentless. Wherever he passed, enemies were struck down, blood scattering across the battlefield. Behind him, Hayashi narrowed his eyes slightly. For some reason, he felt that if the third Hokage ever fought Rashi, the staff might end up being forcibly taken by the Four Tails, Son Goku. Fortunately, once this battle ended, the third Hokage would return to the village, avoiding such an encounter entirely. Hayashi chose not to summon his giant green snake. He had already noticed something strange in Hanzo's gaze. If he brought out another summon now, it would probably remind Hanzo of his lost salamander. Hayashi considered himself a reasonable person. He would not do something so unnecessarily cruel. Still, seeing Hanzo like this, he felt that after the battle, it might be worth sending Nawaki to the Hidden Rain village with a few salamanders as a gesture. After all, the third Hokage's strength seemed almost excessive. Who knew, maybe it really had something to do with diet. The real reason Hayashi avoided summoning was simpler. There were too many people on the battlefield. Sending his snake charging in recklessly would be too dangerous. If it died, that would be a real loss. Unlike Enma, which could transform and was nearly indestructible, his summon did not have such advantages. As for summoning Manda and letting it wreak havoc, Hayashi dismissed the idea almost immediately. The last time he summoned Manda during the assault on Kirigakure, things had not gone well. Afterward, Orochimaru sent him a letter, specifically warning him not to summon Manda unless absolutely necessary. Apparently, being beaten by dozens of Kirigakure ninja, pierced by countless kunai, and struck repeatedly by water release techniques had left quite the impression. In Hayashi's view, that was not a big deal. If Manda had not insisted on trying to eat him, the Kirigakure ninja would not have focused their attacks so aggressively. That was simply karma. By now, the third Hokage had already plunged deep into the enemy formation. With his overwhelming skill and unyielding mindset, he cut through the battlefield with terrifying efficiency. Hayashi shifted his focus away from him and gripped Samehada tightly. Then he moved. He broke through the formation alone. 6 or 7 Sunagakure Jonin rushed to intercept him. As he passed through them, Samehada expanded, its grotesque mouth opening wide as it tore through their bodies, splitting them apart and sending them flying. Hayashi continued forward without slowing down. Along his path, every Sunagakure ninja was reduced to a mist of blood. Strangely, those positioned slightly to the sides died differently. While the ones directly in front were torn apart, the others collapsed silently. Each had a clean, precise wound, no larger than a kunai. Some were pierced through the temple, others through the chest or shoulder. Every strike was lethal and efficient. Only after their bodies hit the ground did the blood begin to flow. By then, Hayashi was already far ahead. Someone shouted. A massive Fuma shuriken spun through the air toward his back, its speed and force enough to impale a ninja instantly. Hayashi did not turn. Just as the weapon was about to strike, he lowered his head slightly. His left hand, crackling with lightning release, shot out and inserted a kunai precisely into the center hole of the spinning shuriken. With a sharp motion, he redirected it. Sparks flew as the Fuma shuriken shot forward at an even greater speed. It tore through a distant Sunagakure ninja before slamming into a massive sand construct created by Raza. The sand briefly resisted, but the shuriken pierced through it and continued onward, punching a hole straight through another ninja hiding behind it. The sheer penetrating power ensured instant death. For a moment, the Sunagakure forces hesitated and began to retreat. Hayashi stood at the center of the chaos like an unstoppable force. To conserve chakra, he had already exited Sage Mode, yet his strength remained overwhelming. No one could withstand even a single strike from him. His Crimson Three-Tomo eyes scanned the battlefield. With just a glance, his genjutsu could momentarily immobilize opponents, halting their movements and leaving them defenseless. Some even ended their own lives under his control. With Samehada constantly supplying chakra, his stamina seemed endless. At this moment, Hayashi was like a force of nature, cutting through enemies as if they were nothing more than grass. He briefly glanced toward the distance, where Raza and Ebizo were engaged with the third Hokage. If they did not come to stop him soon, he would simply wipe out the entire force before they had the chance. Chapter 513, 513, Susanoo 1157 words. In the distance, Raza narrowed his eyes, his expression dark and unreadable. Death was normal on the battlefield. Where was there a war without casualties? In the land of wind, far greater losses had been endured before, in far more brutal ways. As the third Kazekage once said, do not pity them. The village spends resources training ninja. To put it bluntly, it is like raising dogs. When it is time to bite, they must bite hard. Because of this belief, Raza felt no emotional attachment as his subordinates fell one after another. What he could not accept was meaningless death. And right now, that was exactly what was happening. No matter how many Sunagakure ninja were sent in, whether they used jutsu indiscriminately or attacked in groups, none of it had any real effect. On Hanzo's side, things were slightly better. Without the cooperation of his salamander, and with Chiyo's antidotes suppressing toxins, dozens of ninja were barely managing to hold him back. Meanwhile, the third Hokage was rampaging on another part of the battlefield, but Raza and Ebizo had personally moved to intercept him, preventing further large-scale destruction. But then there was Konoha's lightning flash. What were they supposed to do about him? Hayashi was tearing through the battlefield without even relying on Sage Mode, or his Mangekyo Sharingan. He was using pure taijutsu and layered ninjutsu combinations, and with Samahata in hand, his endurance seemed limitless. To put it simply, he was functioning like a humanoid-tailed beast. For a moment, uneasy thoughts surfaced in Raza's mind. From an outside perspective, however, it looked as though Raza was simply watching Konoha's lightning flash move through the battlefield, almost frozen in place. On a battlefield like this, he was actually spacing out. Ebizo felt his blood pressure spike. He had never seen such a disastrous commander behavior. If you are going to go idle, at least finish the fight first. At that moment, the third Hokage's gaze sharpened. Sensing the gold dust pressure weakening, he surged forward with his adamantine staff. With a powerful strike, he shattered 3 of Ebizo's puppets, and used the momentum of the gold dust to close in on Ebizo himself. Raza snapped back to focus. He quickly formed a hand seal, lifting Ebizo with a mass of gold dust just before the attack could land. The third Hokage glanced at them mid-air but did not pursue further. Compared to wasting time here, eliminating the surrounding Sunagakure forces was far more important. Every second, dozens of ninja were falling across the battlefield. Ebizo, suspended in the air, took a breath and glared at Raza. "Do you want us both dead?" "Sorry," Raza replied, rubbing his forehead. "What do we do now?" "Stop Konoha's lightning flash," Ebizo said after a brief pause. "We cannot allow him to continue like this." There was a silence between them. From the beginning, both commanders had been focusing on the third Hokage. On the surface, it was to eliminate him. In reality, neither of them wanted to directly confront Hayashi. The third Hokage had not fought at full strength since before the Second Great Ninja War. His true current ability was unknown. But Hayashi was different. Since the Third Great Ninja War, his combat record had become increasingly terrifying. There were very few ninja willing to directly face him anymore. Especially Raza. Even if he refused to admit it, a kind of psychological pressure had already formed. Just seeing Hayashi made his body feel slightly tense, his chakra circulation subtly affected. "What, you are afraid to go?" Ebizo asked coldly. "It is not that," Raza replied. "If I go, what happens here?" "I will hold the third Hokage with Shimazu and the others," Ebizo answered. The battlefield could only realistically support a few dozen people engaging directly at any given point. The rest could only observe or support from the sidelines. Most genin had already been pulled back from the front lines. "Fine," Raza finally said after a moment of hesitation. "I will go." Meanwhile, Hayashi moved across the battlefield in a straight line. No wasted movement. No elaborate technique chains. Just pure, efficient killing. He cut through enemy formations, occasionally using Rasengan to deflect incoming attacks, and when surrounded, he released combinations of 5 nature transformations to erase everything within range. Several chakra signatures were tracking him from a distance. Elite Jonin, waiting for an opening. And among them, Raza himself. They were waiting for a mistake. Hayashi smiled faintly. After breaking through another stretch of 100 meters, he continued his movement pattern, weaving through the battlefield like a blade cutting through cloth. Soon, the enemy could no longer hold back. 3 Sunagakure Jonin moved in simultaneously. At the same time, more reinforcements rushed in from behind. One of them swung his blade down with wind-release chakra coating its edge. Another flanked from the side. At the same moment, Raza descended from above, gold dust gathering like a storm. The killing intent exploded outward. The sword-wielding Jonin struck first, fully committed to his attack. Hayashi casually raised a hand and caught the blade between 2 fingers. Lightning release surged instantly along the metal and into the attacker's body. Gold dust spear. A golden spear shot through the air at high speed. Hayashi twisted his body slightly and avoided it. Earth release, rock pillar prison. 16 stone pillars erupted around him, sealing his movement. Before he could leap, gold dust surged beneath his feet, binding his lower body. The ground on both sides rose and converged inward. Magnet release, gold dust imperial funeral. A massive pyramid of sand and gold collapsed onto him. The impact swallowed everything. Raza exhaled sharply. Did it work? But the next moment, a blue light erupted from within the pyramid. The structure began to crack and distort. A massive fist burst through the surface. Hayashi's voice came low. Blue chakra exploded outward like a second sun. A towering skeletal figure rose from the sand, its presence overwhelming the battlefield. Hayashi stood within its core, arms folded, eyes cold and focused. The skeleton rapidly evolved, gaining muscle, armor, and structure. A massive blade formed in its hand. Raza's expression changed instantly. What is that? The Susanoo raised its blade and brought it down. Sunagakure ninja in the path froze in terror. Many collapsed immediately, accepting death. Raza forced himself to move, manipulating gold dust to block the strike. Several Jonin simultaneously attempted to resist with wind and earth release techniques. But the blade moved first. A blue arc swept across the battlefield. All incoming techniques were obliterated instantly. The Susanoo's spiral sword continued its descent, cutting through everything in its path with overwhelming force. I'll drop one bonus chapter for every 10 reviews. Leave a review/comment. One bonus chapter will be released for every 100 power stones. Read 100 plus chapters ahead on Patreon. Don't forget to like and subscribe to Novels Wonderland.